The New World, Kalai Bali, where the Bucky pirates are located. In the outer waters, several naval warships spread out in a surrounding situation. A burly man with closed eyes stood on the warship headed by him. This is Vice Admiral of the Admiralty, Steerless. Therefore, all the rights of the king's Shicibukai are now deprived, and it has nothing to do with the world government. Steerless was holding the communicator in his hand, and his eyes suddenly widened with a strong murderous aura. That is to say, Bucky, now you have become ordinary pirates. On the island, a gorgeous hall. The clown Bucky in the red robe gritted his teeth in shock. Damn. You guys are too despicable to make such a decision without prior consultation. Bucky twisted his body and roared across the shore. Do you want to arrest this uncle after using it? A bunch of hypocrites who don't care about benevolence, righteousness and morality. It's all your fault that Crocodile and Doflamingo played around with you before, right? Even if you vent your anger, it's enough for this uncle. The spread-out red robe blocked the light outside, and the few people hiding behind Bucky were shrouded in darkness. The coastline has been completely surrounded. What should we do now? The animal trainer Mochi asked with a constipated face. The lion Liji next to him also widened his eyes, and the lion's face was full of panic. It is quite clear what level their captain is. Without the protective umbrella of Shicibukai, the future life. Cannot imagine. Definitely, it's going to be a big show. Bucky, standing in the sun, was unafraid. With a roar, he activated the ability to tear apart the fruit, propped up the big red robe on his body and floated into the air, and the wild momentum was overwhelmingly vented. Show me the fighting spirit, little ones. Broken voice. Mochi, Arita, Kabaji and other veteran cadres who know the bottom line. D. The New World super pirates who escaped from the advanced city were the opposite, raising their weapons and fighting spirit. Ooh, Captain Bucky, 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 Bucky. Amidst the roar of voices, a man wearing oval goggles and a 3 hairstyle on his head sighed silently. I really didn't expect that I, who rarely traveled to the world of One Piece, would be so special. The Mr. 3 who has become a wax fruit person. Ever since he crossed over and looked in the mirror, Mr. 3 has been squatting in the corner of the hall, thinking about whether to hit the pillar and start over. Grandma is a hammer, forget the supporting roles, you can get me something handsome. What kind of devilish shape is this square face, thin arms and thin legs, and the ugly 3-character braid, bro? But in the end, Mr. 3 gave up the dangerous idea of suicide. Not to mention whether death in this world will really be gone, just hitting the solid and thick pillars in the hall, it is estimated that the dog will bark in pain. He is afraid of pain. So let's take a look at the situation first. In the high hall, the clown Bucky listened to the fanatical shouts of the younger brothers who were stronger than himself, with a resolute and fearless expression. Little ones, let them see the horror of the Bucky pirates now. If you feel scared, hide here as much as you like, and let this uncle go and destroy them all. When the words fell, Bucky raised his red robe and looked murderously at the warships on the coastline. Bah, Captain Bucky, I didn't expect that even if we were deprived of the identity of Shicibukai, the first thing you thought of was our safety. The younger brothers were moved to tears. Immediately afterwards, a stern look appeared on their faces, and they picked up the weapons in their hands and blocked them in front of Bucky one by one. Let's go, Captain Bucky. Among them, there is a big pirate who once had a bounty of more than 100 million, pulled out his saber, and burst out with a powerful armament color that directly dyed it pitch black. But the Lieutenant General of the headquarters. How can you disturb our king in the first place? He took the lead in attacking, jumped off the high hall, and attacked the naval warships on the coastline with great speed. When the rest of the younger brothers saw this, their blood boiled, and they followed behind to charge into the battle. The hall, which was slightly crowded just now, suddenly became empty. PFF'd. A group of simple-minded guys. The Navy is obviously prepared this time, and only fools will confront them head-on. Bucky shrank back from the high position, and faced Mochi and other cadres with a wicked smile that the plan had succeeded. Let's get away from the secret road behind the island while they hold the Navy, brothers. He lowered his voice. Everyone nodded without hesitation. Just as he was about to turn around and run away, suddenly, a muscular man who forgot to bring his gun turned back and saw the scene in front of him. Captain Bucky, you. Bucky walking the catwalk, huh? Bucky was so frightened that his body hidden in the Dahongpao split open on the spot, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. If this group of guys who are as strong as monsters know that he wants to abandon them and run for his life alone, then the result. It must be dead without a corpse. Captain Bucky, I didn't expect you to. The complexion of the muscular man turned gloomy and black at that time. Just when Bucky and the others could not bear the torment and were about to reveal their true colors, the younger brother, who seemed to be a ruthless character, suddenly changed his style of painting, and moved tears like bursting a dike. Captain Bucky, I didn't expect you to trust us so much, and you handed over the fate of the pirates to us without looking at the battle situation. Damn, is this the courage and awareness of the crew of One Piece, the red-haired Shanks' old enemy? In the end, what kind of powerhouse did I follow? Don't worry, I will never betray your trust. Under the stunned and unbelievable gazes of everyone, the muscular man wiped his nose and tears, turned his head without hesitation, and rushed to the frontal battlefield. Forgot all about, his gun has not been taken. Ahahaha. Go, let's make a fuss. Bucky, who was on the brink of revealing the stuffing, straightened his waist and was in high spirits. Witnessing this large-scale brain-filling screen of self-introduction, even if Mr. 3 has read the original book, he still can't help but let out an elegant national quintessence. Fuck. Is this Nima the god of Bucky with the overlord luck in the top brain supplement halo? It's so terrifying. Huh. 3. What's the matter with you? It's been very wrong since just now. It was at this time that Bucky, who was relieved, finally discovered the unusualness of Mr. 3. Hearing this, the other crew members followed, with the same doubts in their eyes. I haven't paid attention to what Bucky didn't say. In this case, shouldn't the two of you be leaning on each other and plotting how to escape? Arita, the slippery fruit ability with a hot body holding a mace, was the first to speak. Don't confuse this uncle with this guy. Bucky, who was wearing a big red robe, immediately jumped out to express his dissatisfaction, and this uncle is not called escape, it is called a strategic retreat. Alrita put her hand on her forehead and nodded again and again. Yes, yes, yes. At this moment, Mr. 3, who had performed abnormally throughout the whole process, suddenly raised his head, the corners of his mouth twitched, and he let out a strange laugh like a stroke. So it is, ahahaha, then things become interesting. Mr. 3's eyes flashed with scorching light, full of undisguised excitement. Just now, he successfully bound the system and obtained the standard plugin for traversers. Everyone, now that the Shicibukai system has been abolished, and the world pattern is about to undergo great turmoil, I have a plan. Would you like to listen carefully? Mr. 3 put away his weird laughter and raised his goggles earnestly. Beneath the lenses reflecting a little light, there are a pair of wise eyes. Looking at Mr. 3, who suddenly became so serious, Bucky, look at me, I look at you, and then in the next second, all of them shook their heads in unison. Their intuition told them that Mr. 3, whose words and deeds became extremely strange and abnormal after hearing the news of the abolition of Shicibukai, wanted to say something at this time, but the cliff was a huge pit. I don't want to. Listen to a ghost, it's still more important to escape now. I have the same opinion. Hoo-hoo. The time went back to a few minutes ago, that is, after Mr. 3 had just dismissed the idea of knife. Ding. Congratulations on gaining the courage to live in this world and successfully binding the strongest Emperor subsystem. The strongest Emperor subsystem, host, Mr. 3. Appearance. Charm of personality, 45, physical fitness, B. Lucky value. E+S. The clown Bucky camp has its own buff, it will disappear when it leaves. Abilities. Wax fruit, unawakened, armed color domineering, Mang Shin, scene color domineering, Mang Shin. Props. None, current goal. Successfully recruit more than one Shichibukai, new or old, to join the clown Bucky Pirates, strengthen the force, and take the second-in-command position of the Bucky Pirates. Target reward 15. 1 Shicibukai, fruit ability development capsule, awakening of domineering and domineering aptitude, appearance, personality charm, plus 20. Target reward 2. 2 Shichibukai, complete target reward 1 unlocked. The simple and easy to understand panel directly makes Mr. 3 excited, changing the previous lifeless appearance, and it is directly full of chicken blood. This reward, face value and personality charm can be increased. Is there anything more energizing than this? In order to make himself more attractive, Mr. Three's eyes ignited a raging flame called hope. Soon, he had a preliminary plan in his mind. Before crossing, he followed the One Piece comics to the latest story of Luffy's awakening of Nika Fruit and Kaido's death battle. Naturally, he had some understanding of the current world pattern and the situation of many pirate groups. When it comes to recruiting new and old Shicibukai, in the current time period, of course, the one with the highest success rate is that one. So, under the eyes of Bucky and the others full of disgust, Mr. Three unhurriedly supported the goggles. Hee, since you asked the question sincerely, then I will tell you with great mercy, this wonderful strategy of mine. When Bucky heard the words, his teeth instantly became jagged, and when he raised his hand, he slashed horizontally with a knife. Who the hell asked the question in good faith, bastard? You look like we really want to hear your bullshit tricks. You're still showing mercy. You rush up to fight those damn navies to buy us time to escape. That's the greatest mercy. The rest of the people also showed helpless and speechless expressions. The lion niche is even more rounded, shocked by Mr. Three's brazenness. Having been with the third brother for so long, I thought that I already knew the third brother thoroughly, but I never expected. His cheeks are thicker than his wax. Mr. Three's expression was calm, and quite naturally he moved away the knife that Bucky chopped on his shoulder. Bucky, if I say that this brilliant plan can be successfully implemented, will you have a chance to become the new Sea Emperor? Sea Emperor. The people who were still lacking in interest were suddenly shocked, and then the group stretched out their right hand, claw, buckled their ears, and began to pack their things on their own to prepare to run away. As Shicibukai, whose power and prestige are closest to the four Emperor pirates, they are very aware of the weight of the title, Sea Emperor, and they are also very self-aware. They, a pirate group who had to run away even when they saw the navy in the East China Sea, were able to inexplicably get into the position of Shicibukai. Although it is no longer there, it is already very lucky. What about the four emperors? Just a few of them, why? Just their captain, why? With special Bucky march bombs in the soles of his shoes. 3. I know that the deprivation of our Shicibukai privileges will have a great impact on you, but Bucky looked at the serious Mr. Three, with sincere sadness and pity in his clown-painted eyes. Think about it, we're not easy to survive in that damn place in the advanced city. What's the point of this crisis now? You have to cheer up, brother. This reaction is naturally also expected by Mr. Three. To capture the thief first to capture the king, as long as the captain, Bucky the clown, can make up his mind to follow his advice and take action, recruit Shicibukai and then become handsome, there is a chance to implement it. Of course, another reason for choosing Bucky as a breakthrough is that this product has two obvious weaknesses and is easy to fool. Bucky, after becoming the fourth emperor, we can rely on our reputation to gather more powerhouses. He spoke slowly. Brother, listen to me, it's right, let's pack up now. Bucky didn't put Mr. Three's words in his ears, and even started planning his escape route. There are more powerhouses, so they can gather together to catch the navy in one sweep, right? Mr. Three. With a large number of strong people, we can occupy more territory and plant our pirate flags on countless islands. Bucky. By the way, Mochi, remember to bring the treasure map you got last time. You must not lose it. No matter how many islands there are, let alone the Admiral of the Navy, just come to a Lieutenant Admiral's fleet, and we can't eat and go. Mr. Three. After occupying the island, we can collect a large amount of gold and silver jewelry, the kind that many ships can't put down. Bucky. 3. If you really can't stand the blow, just take a nap. If you're lucky, you can still dream of us becoming the four emperors. No matter how much treasure there is, if you have a life, you have to have a life. And many more, etc., etc. 3. What did you say? A super treasure that several ships can't fit. Bucky's indifferent expression exploded instantly, turning into extreme ecstasy. The whole person was so excited that it was torn apart, and the vision in front of him was even occupied by the imaginary screen full of gold and gold. After becoming the fourth emperor, this is for sure. After the territory is more, the probability of collecting the legendary treasure map will also greatly increase. The corners of Mr. Three's mouth outlined a sly smile, deliberately showing a disappointed expression, and said, "Oh, there is no way, if you really don't want to listen to my tricks, you are willing to hand over the legendary treasure map to others." The words haven't finished yet, but seeing Bucky's adrenaline soaring, anger is written all over his clown face. What a joke. Treasure, the legendary treasure map is mine. Isn't he the mere emperor of the sea? As long as this uncle thinks, it is not a matter of grasping it? Tell me about it. 3. Your brilliant plan. As soon as this statement came out, the other officials of the Bucky pirates immediately exploded. Hey Captain, are you serious? Don't mess around with the third brother. That's the 4 emperors. Do you think you can successfully pull down an existence like that? It will die, it will really die. Bucky waved his hand and suddenly stopped the noisy voices of the crowd. He looked at Mr. 3, his eyes full of determination. What a joke, how can any pirate turn a blind eye to the treasure in his hand, bastard? Okay, Mr. 3, come on, talk about your plan. Seeing that the atmosphere was in place, Mr. 3 no longer grumbled. After a light cough, he replied, that's it. Now the world government has made up its mind to abolish the Shicibukai system, which means that not only us, but also the active duty Shicibukai like Hawkeye and the Empress will lose their privileges and become ordinary pirates who are wanted like everyone else. The perennial peace of mind was suddenly brought back to its original shape. Although they have enough strength to traverse this sea, there will definitely be a lot of discomfort and trouble at the beginning. If we can help them solve these troubles as soon as possible at this time, does that mean that there is an opportunity to recruit these powerhouses who dominate one side to their command? At that time, do we, the Bucky pirates who have integrated the Shicibukai, still need to fear the 4 emperors and the admiral? Hearing this, Bucky held his chin with his hand and nodded thoughtfully. It makes sense. 3. I didn't expect you to think like a pig, ha ha ha. Others who had no interest at first also put their ears close. The Mr. 3 idea is undoubtedly extremely difficult to implement, but it makes sense in theory. Even if you can't let those guys who are as strong as monsters join in, you can only make a profit by simply gaining a good impression and forming an alliance. They are all human beings in the world of pirates. After a little bit of understanding, they will naturally understand the huge opportunities contained in them. Even if it's a pig's brain, it's much easier to use than your head stuffed with 3 pounds of cow dung. Mr. 3 replied without hesitation. It's a good idea, but how do I do it? Slippery fruit ability. Arita walked over with a huge mace with a solemn expression. Those guys are not characters that can be easily fooled. Mr. 3 looked up at this coolly dressed woman with an almost perfect body proportions. Although the sturdy figure of a humanoid tank before eating the fruit kept popping up in my mind, I have to admit that the current Alrita is very beautiful. What he saw with his own eyes was completely different from the 2-dimensional painting style through the screen. Mr. 3 was convinced that if Alrita in front of him traveled to the real world, she would definitely be a super beauty. Especially the skin, it's incredibly slippery, and it feels like it's immune to the damage of stick weapons. Hit it with a stick, and make a slippery sound, and it's silky smooth to the end. It's a pity that the most important thing in the world of pirates is beauties. After just being amazed for a few seconds, Mr. 3 calmed down his restless heart. He pointed his finger to his forehead, revealing a mysterious smile. I have put all the detailed operations here. If there is no accident, at least 2 Shicibukai can be recruited. Such a pretentious appearance naturally attracted the unhappiness of the fox friend Bucky. Bastard. Galtino, when did you become so pretentious? He didn't even call Mr. 3's code name, but called his real name directly. This shows how upset Bucky, who was robbed of the limelight, was at this time. Haha, this is called self-confidence. Mr. 3 chuckled lightly. So what are you going to do? Those guys can't be fooled in with just a few words. Bucky's expression changed from unhappy to serious, and he suggested, why don't we find an opportunity to form an alliance with them? We will be responsible for providing information. The implication is that there is a fight to let the other Shicibukai dry, and they hide behind the scenes. Entering can be burned, killed and looted, and retreating can be anointed with oil on the soles of the feet. Mr. 3 quickly understood the meaning of Bucky's words, and couldn't help but sighed in his heart. It is the existence of the reversed name. This guy's heart is really dirty. This is indeed the best solution for the current Bucky pirates' next actions, doing lewd things in the name of the alliance. But this way. Where to put his face, how to become more handsome and domineering. Don't worry, just leave the recruitment to me. Mr. 3 still looked confident. As a traveler, he has seen the entire One Piece, and has an unparalleled and profound understanding of the characters, experiences, weaknesses, etc. of the characters here. This is his biggest plugin besides the system. Are you serious? Bucky stared at Mr. Three's eyes carefully, but he couldn't see a trace of panic or humility under the goggle lenses. In that case, there seems to be no reason for us not to cooperate with you. Tell me, what do we need to do? As a companion who has lived and died together, he finally chose to trust. Mr. Three knew that the stage of joking with each other was over, and said seriously, I need you to defend this Qiwuhai Bali and the surrounding affiliated islands as our base in the future. After all, our goal this time is to convene Shicibukai to become the Four Emperors. If you don't even have the strength to defend your own territory, let alone Shicibukai, even the pirates of the New World will be hard to convince. This is very important. The other four emperors like Kaido and Ant have fixed bases, but even so, the Navy did not dare to rashly send troops to attack. Although there is a tacit understanding between the two forces and many gray interest chains, this is itself a manifestation of hard power. If you don't show the courage of the four emperors to the outside world, the success rate of recruiting Shicibukai will be greatly reduced. This is extremely necessary. That's it, I understand, brother. Bucky rubbed his chin with his right hand. After thinking for a while, he asked other pirate officials around him, so, what's your opinion? He is afraid of death, but he is also a very ambitious pirate. As an intern on the One Piece ship, the red-haired Shanks next door has been on the top of the four emperors for many years. Even the admiral and marshal of the Navy have to give him face. How can he be reconciled? So, after listening to Mr. Three's words, Bucky was already a little bit ready to move. The current chaotic period is indeed the best time to gather Shicibukai. But the Bucky pirates are a collective, and as the captain, it is necessary for him to seek the opinions of other members of the cadre. Isn't that frantic look in your eyes the best opinion? Arita waved the mace in her hand a few times, as if doing warm-up exercises. Speaking of which, after we became Shicibukai, I don't seem to have fought much. Cabbage, the chief of staff riding on a unicycle, drew out the sword from his waist and licked the blade. My unicycle has long been thirsty. Mochi. Li Chi, it seems that it's time to fight side by side again. This time, let's simply kill 50 people, he. The lion niche bared his fangs. Roar. Mr. Three looked at the cadres whose faces suddenly turned vicious and vicious. As a young man with 3 good qualities, he couldn't help feeling a little terrified. This is the truest face of pirates. Next second. Whoosh whoosh. Everyone including Bucky rushed over at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye and surrounded Mr. Three with a strange expression on their faces. Brother, don't you want to fool us to stay here and then pack up and run away? I also think this possibility is much more real than some bullshit recruiting Shicibukai strategy. Brother Three, it's not that I slander you, it's that you really look like this person. The noisy and unruly rants left Mr. Three speechless. The style of these guys is even more exaggerated than what the animation sees. They can change when they say it changes, and they can't figure out the logic at all. Also, Mr. Three is usually in the pirate group. How treacherous and wretched must he be to be so suspicious? Don't worry, everyone. I swear in the name of Galdino that one day, we will definitely make our pirate group successfully ascend to the throne of the Four Emperors. While making promises, Mr. Three did not forget to continue to make a big cake for this group of people. A very clumsy and abstract cake, but everyone present was very useful and nodded thoughtfully. Believing what he said. By the way, who is the first Shicibukai you want to recruit? Bucky asked a crucial question. Hearing this, everyone became quiet in an instant, and they all turned their attention to Mr. Three. Mr. Three smiled indifferently, turned and walked to the balcony outside the hall, put his hands behind his back, and calmly watched the battle between the naval pirates on the coastline. After pondering for a few seconds, he opened his lips lightly and opened his mouth slowly. It's not someone else, she is. The current emperor of the Amazon and Lily Kingdom of the pirate country, the captain of the 9 snake pirates. Pirate Empress, Boya Hancock. What? Pirate Empress. The moment they heard the name, the eyes of the other pirate officials including Bucky burst out, and their facial expressions were extremely exaggerated. As the supreme leader of a fighting kingdom, there is no doubt about the ferocity of the pirate queen, and although this person has the title of the most beautiful in the world, her personality is extremely bad, and she will petrify people and kick them to pieces. Compared to Hawkeye, who has a milder personality, or Little Whitebeard, Wable, who has a clear direction of interests, the difficulty of recruiting is simply not too high. Well, it seems more difficult to recruit the world's #1 swordsman. But at least, it won't be so easy to lose lives, right? The Amazon Lily, which is now mostly under siege by the Navy, is simply a super bomb that, boom, at the touch of a button. I know you're surprised, but that's what I said, don't worry, I'm measured. Mr. Three's reaction to the crowd has long been no surprise. Choosing the pirate Empress as the first recruiting target was the conclusion he came to after careful consideration, not simply because he wanted to see the true face of the most beautiful woman in the world on a whim. Actually there are, but that's just incidental. The main reason is because there is a country behind Hancock that needs to be well protected. This made the burden and restraint on her shoulders far greater than those of the other Shicibukai, and it was difficult to fully use her hands and feet, and it was extremely difficult to even temporarily avoid the Navy's capture. In such a predicament, if you can help in time, the possibility of successful recruitment will be greatly increased. And more importantly, Mr. Three, as a traveler who has read the original book, knows that the Empress has fatal weaknesses that other Shicibukai do not have. She was once a slave of the Tianlong people, and she is still shrouded in the shadow of that dark experience. As long as he can make good use of this vital information, Mr. Three believes that he has a 10% chance of successfully recruiting Hancock. Even if it doesn't work, the possibility of temporarily mixing the name of the alliance is still quite high. Of course, it sounds simple, but how to implement it depends on your ability. Well, since you have this kind of blind self-confidence and awareness, brother, what we can do as companions, apart from trusting, is to help you build a decent coffin in advance. After the shock, Bucky's clown face was full of sadness and reluctance. With tears in his eyes, he turned around and said to the animal trainer Mo-Chi in white, Mo-Chi, is there any more expensive wood on our island? There are several good woods for custom coffins, but... Mo-Chi lowered his head and thought about it seriously, and said, Brother Three will most likely be a few pieces of gravel on the daughter's island this time. There is no need to build a special coffin, right? Mr. Three. It's clear that these guys really have no confidence in him at all. You can shut up, Bucky. Instead of making a coffin, you should quickly find someone with strong intelligence to help me. Mr. Three doesn't want to talk nonsense with these heartless guys anymore. He just wants to hurry up to the Amazon Lily and complete the recruitment goal. You know, Cabbage is generally in charge of intelligence personnel. Bucky put away the sadness on his face and looked at Cabbage, the chief of staff on the unicycle. Kabaji stopped the movement of the soles of his feet and said, because it is a windless belt, our forces have not penetrated into the vicinity of the Amazon Lily, but there is a stronghold in the nearest sea area outside the windless belt. After becoming Shichibukai, the Bucky pirates developed the underground industry like Doflamingo and sent mercenaries to all parts of the world through their privileges, and a large number of younger brothers harvested from the advanced city. Even established a mercenary organization called Bucky Express. So in terms of intelligence gathering and undercover eyeliner, the Bucky pirates have done quite well. That's it, tell me about the island where the base is located later. After thinking about it, Mr. Three continued, one more thing, prepare a small and fast ship. I need to arrive at Amazon Lily in the fastest time. As for the crew of the ship, the navigator and the helmsman will do, no fighters are needed. Bucky responded quickly. Of course there is no problem. Immediately afterwards, worry appeared on his clown face involuntarily. Looking at Mr. Three, the good brother who was born to death with him, after pondering for a few seconds, he finally chose the style that he was best at, and a wickedness flashed in his eyes. Don't worry, brother, if you really can't come back, I will avenge you. Even if you bet the entire Bucky pirates, Hancock will have to pay the price. The sudden viciousness made Mr. Three a little surprised. Although this clown Bucky is insidious and cunning, and even often pushes the crew up as a shield to run away secretly, I have to say that this guy is benevolent enough to his brothers and companions. Don't worry, no matter what, I also blocked Magellan's poisonous dragon, who was helpless even for Crocodile and Ivankov, and he couldn't die. He raised his hand and patted Bucky on the shoulder. Ha ha ha, that's true. Bucky laughs as he recalls the hard times in Advanced City. 10 minutes later. The back of Qiwuhai, a hidden escape route. Inside the small fast ship, Mr. Three, who was ready, stood on the bow and looked back at the island behind him. Although it was impossible to see the situation there, from the roar of artillery fire and the sound of the collision of weapons, it was not difficult to imagine how intense the battle between the Bucky pirates and the Vice Admiral was. As a world government well aware of the strength of the Shicibukai, it must have sent troops to attack after careful planning, and it may even carry new weapons that are more terrifying than human weapons. But at this time Mr. 3 had no other choice but to pin his hopes on Bucky and others. I hope when I come back, I don't see a deserted island full of corpses. He sighed softly, then turned and walked into the lounge. According to the navigator, it would take 4 to 5 hours to travel from Qiwuhai to the nearest stronghold island to Amazon Lily, even for a new type of ship. Mr. 3 needs to carefully plan the details of the next contact with Hancock and the 9 snake pirates during this period. Don't look at his confident appearance, but he is really worried about negotiating with Hancock alone as pirate Mr. 3. After all, it is different from what the animation wants to show to the audience. It is a big pirate who can still have a place in the pirate world where many forces are entrenched. Its brutality is evident. If you treat Hancock in the image of a simple and cute love brain, you probably don't know how he died. Not everyone is like Luffy, the protagonist with his own halo. The time at sea passed quickly, and because of the clown Bucky pirate flag hanging on the boat, there were no ignorant pirates who dared to rob. Although the abolition of the Shicibukai system has spread throughout the New World, their power and prestige are there, and few people dare to provoke them. Soon, Mr. 3 arrived at the island where the base was located, a remote and unnamed deserted island. Several young men in black robes and face tattoos received the news and waited early on the coast. Seeing Mr. 3 with the iconic 3 hairstyle getting off the ship, several people bowed respectfully and said, "Hello, third brother. Let's talk about it, the current situation of Amazon Lily and the distribution of naval forces." Somewhere on the island is hidden in a cave in the jungle, and the bright candle light flickers gently, illuminating Mr. 3 sitting in the main seat. Hearing this, the intelligence officer in black robes who had already investigated the situation clearly stood up and said respectfully, "Brother Wei, now the Amazon Lily Island has been surrounded by groups, and the leader of the team is Rear Admiral Kebi of the Navy headquarters, who has been in the limelight recently. The master hidden in the dark is not yet clear." After a brief pause, the intelligence officer continued, "According to our observations, the Navy dispatched a total of 5 large warships to surround the Amazon Lily in different directions, with small patrol boats monitoring back and forth between the warships to prevent the inside people escaped." Hearing the intelligence officer's report, Mr. 3 frowned slightly. The fact that Daughter Island was surrounded by many was completely expected. The Navy's actions after the abolition of the Shichibukai system was as fast as lightning, and it basically wouldn't give the Shichibukai time to react. But the encirclement that isolates the inside and outside was unexpected. After all, the Daughter's Island is in a windless zone, and it is a problem for ordinary ships to even move, let alone form a perfect and tight blockade chain. It can be seen from this that the Navy should definitely win this crusade against the Empress. To prevent the people inside from escaping, what if you go in? Mr. 3 asked. The intelligence officer shook his head slightly and said, "As soon as we received your message, we tried to approach, but were expelled by the artillery warning." "Is that so?" Mr. 3 has a grim expression on his face. "Then things get a little trickier. I can't even find the gap to enter, so what are you talking about pumping in it, coughing, stirring the situation?" "Wait. Listen to what you mean. Hasn't the Navy launched an attack on Daughter Island yet?" Mr. 3 suddenly caught this key point. "No, there is a team of reporters sent by Morgans in the Navy, so the two sides are still in the stage of negotiation." The intelligence personnel briefly thought about it and guessed, but with the tough attitude of the Pirate Queen, the possibility of surrendering and admitting defeat is very low, and most of them will still fight. The team of reporters sent by Morgans actually have the right to participate in this kind of crusade against pirates? Such a question emerged in Mr. 3's mind involuntarily. But soon, after thinking of what the Navy did in the war on the top, he suddenly realized. Unlike other Shichibukai, such as the Bucky pirates, whose members are all vicious pirates, the 9 snake pirates is a small country. If the Navy wants to do something more or less, it has to consider the influence of public opinion. Involving journalists in reporting during the negotiation stage between the two sides can show the world their original intention of desiring peace and not hurting innocent civilians, so as to win people's hearts to the greatest extent possible. This is very necessary. After all, the Shicibukai system has existed for a long time, and it has long been ingrained in the subconscious minds of people all over the world. If there is no reason to directly attack it, it will inevitably fall into the popularity of people with intentions and bear the notoriety of crossing the river and demolishing the bridge. Of course, as for the violent conflict or even the bloody siege that will inevitably break out later, it is enough to expel the reporters from the fleet in advance. Later, it was declared that the pirate queen was extremely vicious, and she took the initiative to provoke a war regardless of the safety of the people. Who knows what is right and wrong? This is already a routine operation for the Navy. But it is precisely because of this that there is an opportunity to take advantage of it. Tell me the detailed location of their warships and the patrolling interval of the patrol ships. Mr. 3 immediately regained his spirits. Okay, good third brother. The intelligence officer was obviously a little astonished, but he still answered truthfully and cautiously. He knew very well that the man in front of him, who didn't look very good and not very strong, was the life and death brother of their big boss, Bucky the Clown, and even had a vague tendency to become the second in command of the Bucky Pirates. Such a character is definitely not as simple as it seems, and he does not dare to be slighted. The positions of the 5 warships are fixed. For the patrol ships, every time they complete a patrol route, they will stop beside the warships for 10 minutes to rest for supplies. However, we have simulated that even the fastest powered boat cannot cross the blockade in just 10 minutes and travel 2 or 3 kilometers to Daughter Island. Shelling to expel. Hearing this, Mr. 3 lowered his head and pondered for a while. Then he clapped his hands. 10 minutes, that's it, 10 minutes is enough. Seeing him so confident, the intelligence officer couldn't help but look worried. Third brother, are you planning to break in? Your identity is relatively sensitive. If one is accidentally caught and recognized by the Navy, the consequences will be disastrous. Hee. Do I look like that kind of idiot without a brain? The corner of Mr. 3's mouth raised a faint smile. There is already a plan in mind. The third brother is wise. Many intelligence officers in black robes bowed slightly, and did not continue to entangle, but flattered in unison. Although what they want to say most at this moment is, third brother, you are so fucking wretched when you laugh. Naturally, Mr. 3 didn't know the little juju in the hearts of the intelligence officers in front of him. He only thought that the third brother's cry was really boshi. Thinking about it this way, it's not unacceptable to become a small-faced character like Mr. 3 just after crossing the border. Well, compared to a pure chicken at the beginning. The third brother, when are you going to leave? An intelligence officer couldn't help asking. Mr. 3 got up and walked out of the cave, looking at the distant sky where the sun had not yet set on the top of the mountain, and said solemnly, don't worry, before you come, let you know that the people who are good at branding and tattooing are on the island now. When he left Qiwuhai, he briefly explained a few things to him over the phone, so the intelligence officer could answer the Amazon Lily's situation fluently and without any omission. We're already on our way, and we'll be there in about half an hour, the intelligence officer replied. Half an hour, it's just right, I can simply warm up. Mr. 3 nodded slightly and said to the people who followed, don't disturb me during this time before he comes. Learn. Afterwards, Mr. 3 wandered around this deserted island. After finding an open space, start a simple special training on the wax fruit in the new level knowledge and armed colors mastered by Mr. 3. Even though he inherited most of Mr. 3's memories when he crossed over, there is still a slight gap between the actual operation and the concept. The next contact with the 9 snake pirates is likely to be unavoidable in armed conflict, or to be more precise, it is an indispensable trial during negotiation. There is nothing wrong with adapting to this body's fighting ability in advance. Candle, if it is developed well, it is estimated that it is not weaker than ka or glutinous rice fruit, or even the frozen fruit of the green pheasant. Mr. 3 moved his mind slightly and raised his palm. As the figure 3 hairstyle on the top of the head ignited flames, a familiar and unfamiliar touch immediately came from the palm of his hand. The viscous liquid wriggled for a while, turned into pure white fluid wax and dripped frantically from the palm, spreading in all directions with Mr. 3 as the center. After a short time, the earth within a radius of 10 meters was completely covered by thick and solidified wax blocks. It's quite a wonderful feeling. Obviously I have never done such an exaggerated thing, but it is unexpectedly handy to use. Since that's the case, it shouldn't be difficult to display the domineering look in the armed look, but this new level. Mr. 3 put away the fruit ability and stimulated the armed domineering. Then, he looked down at his rather inconspicuous black arm and fell into contemplation. In terms of specific feelings, it is slightly stronger than the state of ordinary people tensing their muscles. Well, cute new class, well-deserved reputation. Half an hour of training time is fleeting. The branded tattoo personnel that Mr. 3 wanted appeared on the coastline quite punctually and were brought over by the intelligence personnel. This. Looking at the scene in front of them, several intelligence officers were dumbfounded and shocked. In front of them, the previously open space had been replaced by a deep pit with a diameter of 10 meters. In the deep pit, the overwhelming silver-white candles are burning with extremely high-temperature red-orange flames. Just standing on the edge, you can feel the scorching hot air wave coming towards you. Does half an hour go by so quickly? Opposite the edge of the pit, Mr. 3, whose clothes were tattered by the flames, walked slowly. After getting started with the wax fruit, he successfully developed a trick that was barely considered a trick. He smiled and was in a good mood. The first time they met, he ripped off his tattered shirt. "Are you the branding officer?" Mr. 3 looked at the lean man in front of him. Without talking nonsense, he raised his hand and used the ability of the wax fruit to construct a simple figure. "I tattoo this pattern on my back, and make it look like a brand from more than 10 years ago, can you do it?" The tattoo artist took a brief look and nodded, "No problem at all." "Okay. Let's start now." Mr. 3 turned around and turned his back to the tattoo artist. The intelligence officers next to him are all confused. You look at me and I look at you, completely confused. Why, at the critical moment of contact with the pirate Empress, the third brother has to tattoo his back. The flying dragon's kick mark that marks the Draco slaves? Amazon Lily, outer windless waters. Third brother, we can only send you here. If you go further, you will be discovered by the naval patrol boats. On a small special ship, intelligence officers in black robes reported to Mr. 3 in a low voice. Standing on the bow of the ship, Mr. 3 looked up, and could vaguely see part of the outline of Daughter's Island, as well as the blockade chain of naval warships gathered around the periphery. "Well, you go back first, as I explained, prepare the submarine under the island. The waters around Daughter's Island in the windless zone are full of giant sea king's nests. It is not easy to successfully drive the submarine to the designated position without disturbing the Navy on the sea. But that's not something Mr. 3 needs to consider. As Doflamingo's redevelopment after the fall, one of the best underground organizations in the world, if the Bucky Express Mercenary Corps can't even handle this, he can only recognize it." "Understood. That third brother, you must be careful." Having said that, there was not much worry on the faces of the intelligence officers. On the contrary, the eyes of several people hidden under the black robes are somewhat expectant, wanting to see what ingenious and magical means will be used by the third brother, who is known to the entire Bucky pirates for his insidiousness and treacherousness, to avoid the naval blockade chain, dive into the Daughter Island. You know, although there is a 10-minute gap in the blockade chain of the naval patrol boat, such a short time is not enough to rush from the blockade chain to Daughter Island in any case without being discovered by the Navy. Mr. 3 waved his hand and didn't say much, just jumped off the bow and stood firmly on the small wooden boat that had been prepared earlier. The things on the wooden boat are very simple: 2 oars, a monocular, and a ground of gold. Several intelligence officers stared at Mr. 3 and did not dare to blink, for fear that if they were not careful, they would miss the third brother's highlight operation. This is a great learning opportunity. Moved. Third brother, he moved. The eyes of the few people swallowed their saliva, and in those wide eyes, the slightly thin back of Mr. 3 was reflected. I saw him sitting on the bow of the small wooden boat, adjusted his sitting posture, slowly raised his arms, and then roll up your sleeves, grab your paddle, and start paddling. Whoa, whoa. The small wooden boat slowly sailed towards the Navy's blockade chain at the speed of a turtle crawling. This? Could it be that the third brother intends to just lean the ship over in front of the Navy? An intelligence officer rubbed his eyes, unable to believe what he saw. It turns out that the third brother didn't take the so-called Chief Admiral of the Navy headquarters in his eyes at all. From the very beginning, he chose to attack hard. One person fights the entire naval headquarters fleet, so bold, so confident. Is this the existence of the Bucky pirates who are second only to the boss of Bucky? Third brother, I admit that I was too judging by appearances just now, and I even thought that a strong person like you would look quite wretched when laughing." With a snap, he raised his hand and gave himself a big mouth. When the other intelligence officers saw this, they also looked at each other in dismay. After being silent for a long time, after seeing the third brother completely gone, someone said in a weak voice, "Brother, in fact, I also think the third brother is very wretched when he smiles." "I feel the same way." Agree with both hands. Fortunately, Mr. 3 is far away at this time. If not, the level will have to give these few recent, wax hands to destroy flowers. If the intelligence is correct, after this wave of patrols, the patrol boat should stay on the warship for 10 minutes to resupply. While rowing the paddle slowly, Mr. 3 picked up the monocular that he had prepared earlier, and focused his attention on the naval patrol boat in the distance. The wooden boat pushed away from the calm sea and moved slowly forward without making much noise. If you lie on the edge of the wooden boat and look down at this time, you can clearly see that the bottom of the boat is covered with a thin layer of white wax, which is used to reduce noise and isolate breath. Although most of the sea kings living in this windless waters do not look down on this little shrimp, Mr. 3, who has sailed carefully for thousands of years and is naturally cautious and stable, has taken all possible preventive measures. Soon, through the lens of the monocular, Mr. 3 saw that the patrol ship in charge of the surrounding waters had completed a patrol mission and was docked on a large warship in the distance. "It's now." He stopped holding his hands and started paddling at full speed. Hum. The light sound that represented the domineering of the armed color came out. In order to achieve the fastest speed, he actually used the domineering of the armed color on the oars. Ahem, it is said to be armed color, but in fact, the new level is just like that. At most, it is to make the oars wear resistant, so as to use strength. Of course, Mr. 3's purpose for doing this is to hone his armament and domineering. If you want the wooden boat to break through the naval blockade at the fastest speed, you still have to rely on the ability of the wax fruit. Thicken the candles at the bottom of the boat to provide forward thrust by continuously spraying a white-gray viscous liquid at the stern. Candles. Whoosh whoosh. The wooden boat changed the speed of the previous turtle, crossed the naval blockade in a wind-breaking trend, and galloped straight towards the daughter island further away. Move it. The third brother starts to exert his strength. As expected of the third brother, the momentum of this fearless charge is simply intoxicating. The third brother blew them up. What the hell is the navy smashed to pieces? On the ships in the outer seas, the intelligence officers who had not left for a long time saw the wooden ship speeding up suddenly. Their hearts also hung up, and their blood began to boil restlessly. They are imagining that the third brother raises his hand with a giant candle fist, and smashes the naval warship together with the patrol boat. It is a pity that Mr. 3's next actions are destined to disappoint them. I saw that after rushing over 100 meters from the naval blockade, he slumped like a deflated balloon, and his speed was quite slow. Not to mention, he still reverse the direction, and swipe back a little bit. Ah, what is the third brother doing? No, the third brother is not cowardly after seeing the huge might of the Navy warship, and wants to escape. I think this possibility is quite high. After all, he is wearing glasses, isn't he? Maybe the degree is too high to be far away, so he can't see clearly? But it's bad if you do that. There's simply not enough time, and the Navy will definitely find out. What should we do? Are we going to pick up the third brother? The intelligence personnel suddenly lost their bottom, and someone turned around and was about to launch a ship to rescue the third brother. This stupidity was quickly stopped by the leading intelligence officers, who knocked on the head with their hands. Corresponding to the wool. The third brother's explanation just now is to let us leave. Can you afford the consequences of rash actions? The third brother must have no deep meaning in doing this. After all, the person in charge of the stronghold picked up the binoculars and carefully observed the third brother who was slowly escaping. After he turned his eyes to the ship that had relaunched the patrol mission, his frowning brows suddenly loosened, his eyes lit up, and he suddenly realized. So it is. It is so. My God, it turns out that the third brother went for this purpose from the very beginning. What a terrible insight and thinking ability. Is this the true strength of the Bucky Pirates cadre? Hearing some passionate remarks, the younger brothers around were a little confused. Why is it so scary all of a sudden? But soon, Mr. 3's next encounter perfectly answered their doubts. Hey! Over there! I don't know that this sea area is blocked now. The patrol boat soon spotted Mr. 3 with oars and approached at great speed. On the ship, sailors in sailor suits held loudspeakers, and the amplified voice contained a very obvious threat of intimidation. Are you a resident of Amazon Lily Island? No one is allowed to enter or leave until the blockade period is lifted. Hurry back to the island and stay there. Mr. 3 tightened his hood tightly on his head and stood up tremblingly from the wooden boat. Looking up at the majestic sea soldier, he was frightened on the spot and collapsed on the wooden boat. He trembled so nervously that he pleaded aloud, "My lord, please let me out. They all said that the navy is going to come in. I don't want to die. I really don't want to die." Yes, yes. He turned his head and groped on the wooden boat for a while, holding out a pile of gold jewelry. These, all for you, please let me out. The two sailors glanced at the golden gold, and a trace of greed flashed in their eyes. But soon, it was repressed by reason. Who do you think we are? Let you go back and wait for the news, then go back and wait for the news. How come there are so many words? Now is the critical period of encircling and suppressing Shicibukai, and there are reporters around, who dare not do such a small act of greed for money. If you don't do it well, you will have a big problem. So now he just wants to complete the task given above and drive back the guy who wanted to sneak away. If you don't want gold, candles will do. I have enough candles here. Mr. 3 still wanted to fight for it. After throwing away the gold in his hand, he scraped down a large piece of candle from the hull of the ship and handed it out to the sea soldiers. This unreasonable action fell in the eyes of the two sailors, and it was a complete act of fright. At the same time, it also completely exhausted their last bit of patience. I will warn you one last time, and return immediately, otherwise don't blame me for listing you as a vicious pirate and kill you on the spot. Don't, I'll go back, don't kill me. Mr. 3 hurriedly turned around to get the paddle, but because his hands were shaking too much, the paddle he picked up fell back to the boat. 3 times in a row, he held the oars steady, and hurriedly sailed back to the Amazon Lily while paddling the water. It's just like that after a little fright. What a shameful guy. If the Pirate Queen's kingdom is full of such soft eggs, then in this battle, I don't think we need to deploy secret weapons. Looking at the figure of the emaciated man desperately rowing for his life, the two sailors started to drive the patrol boat back to the warship after talking contemptuously. According to the request, they need to make a brief report of this matter to the above. However, after Mr. 3's uproar, the two young sailors who were completely distracted had forgotten a very important message. That is, it is impossible for a man to appear in the Amazon Lily that is full of daughters. By the time the two reported the matter to the officer, Mr. 3, who was rowing frantically, had successfully reached the Amazon Lily, which is more than 10 meters off the coast of Daughters Island. Shush. Before Mr. 3 could get the boat close, a piercing sound of breaking air hit him. Several arrows attached to the armed cutter whizzed, hitting the sea on the left and right sides of the wooden boat with precision and accuracy. The strong impact was comparable to a bullet, causing bursts of water. This is a preliminary temptation, and it is also a very obvious threat. Yo, please don't be nervous, a few soldiers. I am not the Navy, but the cadre of the clown Bucky pirates of the original Shichibukai with you, Mr. 3. After stabilizing the swaying wooden boat, Mr. 3 slowly raised his hands. While reporting on his family, he also showed weakness to the Daughter Island warrior who pulled the snake bow on the coastline, showing that he had no malicious intentions. Clown Bucky pirates, what is that? Doubt flashed in the bright eyes of the cool-dressed Daughter Island warrior. Another companion stared at Mr. 3 who raised his hands and replied in a low voice, I don't know, but you dare to come here at such a time. It's definitely not a simple person, stay vigilant. Seeing that they were indifferent, still maintaining the attacking stance of holding a bow, Mr. 3 thought about it, changed his words, and shouted loudly. Can you please report to Lord Snake, just say that Mr. 3, the most handsome man in the Bucky Pirates, has a way to help you get out of the immediate crisis. In a single sentence, it contains 3 vital pieces of information. Hearing this, several female warriors looked at each other, whispering to each other, a little uncertain. Lord Snake Princess? Could it be that this creature with mushrooms in his pants is familiar with Lord Snake Princess? He said that he is the most handsome man, and Lord Snake G is the most beautiful existence. It sounds like they should know each other. It turns out that the most handsome man looks like this. What should I do? His face suddenly attracted me a little. Hey, I said you guys, the point shouldn't be, the most handsome man said. Does he have a way to save us? Because Luffy spent some time on Daughter Island before, the female warriors on the island more or less have some goodwill towards the magical creature, man, at least not as powerful as the hostility towards other creatures. After some discussion, finally a female warrior responded to Mr. Three's words. Hey, the most handsome man, I ask you, can your body stretch as freely as rubber? Unexpected statement. Mr. Three was a little confused by this unexpected question, and combined with the original book, this kind of question is actually reasonable. But, how pure are your minds? How could it be so easy to accept the setting that I am the most handsome man?
Come on, I have to put a candle to my face before I even say it myself, be cheeky.
My body doesn't stretch like rubber. As soon as these words came out, several female warriors suddenly tightened the snake bows in their hands, with a bit of violence in their solemn expressions. However, I can make a candle figurine with the same shape as yours like this. Under the star-like gaze of the female warriors, Mr. Three slowly raised his palm, and through the ability of the wax fruit, condensed several vivid wax figures on his fingertips. Looking closely, Nuoqigang's alert posture is exactly the same as several female warriors on the coast. As early as 2 years ago when Mr. Three played for Crocodile, he had already mastered this skill. For the current Mr. Three, it is not easy. If you like it, I'll give it to you, as a reward for bothering you to inform Lord Snake G. Mr. Three smiled and looked at the female soldiers with round eyes on the opposite side, and he tossed it hard, and the wax figure was firmly caught by them. This reflex is not worth mentioning to a female warrior who has been brutally trained. Okay. I'm going to inform the adults of the pirate group now. The female warrior headed took a close look at the wax figure, her face full of joy. After explaining to his companions, he took back the snake bow and quickly ran back to the island to report. The remaining female warriors played with the wax figures, couldn't help being curious, and began to ask Mr. Three some messy questions about men. Faced with these curious babies, Mr. Three also answered impatiently. I have to say that these female warriors living on Daughter Island are really cute. Soon, the tall and slender female warrior hurried over, her pretty face flushed red, and shouted to Mr. Three on the sea, the most handsome man, Lord Snake, please. Under the leadership of several people, Mr. Three finally set foot on Amazon Lily, a daughter island called a man's paradise, safe and sound. Since it was an emergency period when he was completely blocked by the Navy, he did not suffer from troubles similar to Dojitai and Black Panther. After passing through a village full of women dressed in cool clothes and being looked at by all kinds of cannibalistic eyes, Mr. Three finally met the most beautiful woman recognized by the pirate world in Nine Snake City, where the Emperor lived. Pirate Empress, Boya Hancock, in the outer waters of Amazon Lily, the main naval warship docked directly opposite the port. The 2 young sailors who drove Mr. Three were notified and brought to the warship command. This report was written by the 2 of you. A lieutenant colonel of the Navy headquarters wearing a cloak of justice had a gloomy face, with rage brewing on his scarred face. Yes, Lieutenant Colonel, this report is indeed written by us. Please, is there any question? Sensing the scrutinizing eyes of many officers in the headquarters, the young sailor looked extremely nervous, and his hands and feet were extremely stiff and cold. What's the problem? How dare you ask any questions? The lieutenant colonel, who had always been irritable, was completely ignited with anger, and threw the report in his hand heavily on the recruit's face. Snapped. In an instant, white paper filled with reports flew all over the sky. I ask you, why is the Amazon Lily called Daughter's Island? The pigs living in it are all fucking females. Where is the wretched man who escaped by rowing a boat? It's obvious that they came in from the outer sea and deliberately drove in the opposite direction. They couldn't even see through this little trick. They were played with applause without knowing it. I'm ashamed to say in the report how bravely you drove out the dangerous elements on the island. I think the heads of the 2 of you were kicked by donkeys, right? The middle-aged lieutenant colonel was furious and hated that iron was not steel. What? Only then did the 2 recruits come to their senses. Remembering that bastard's look of, I'm so scared, they couldn't help clenching their fists and gnashing their teeth. Damn guy, how dare you play me? If I knew it, I would have killed that bastard on the spot. As soon as the words fell, there was a sharp pain in the abdomen of the two of them. The furious lieutenant colonel kicked the two of them one by one and smashed them heavily on the wall of the headquarters. Shoot and kill. If it happens to be photographed by the reporter on the ship, how serious the consequences will be spread outside, do you know? The more he thought about it, the angrier he became, and he started to chase after him, wanting to teach those two donkeys a lesson. Forget it, senior. There is a loophole in our patrol mechanism, and the other party is really cunning, no wonder they. A calm and powerful voice came from the head of the headquarters, stopping the lieutenant colonel's atrocities. Hearing the reputation, he saw that the person who spoke was wearing a Navy Justice cloak, his pink hair was tied up with a short cloth with a flower pattern, and there was a pair of round glasses hanging on it. He is not very old, but the aura exuding from his body is quite stable and mature. This person is the apparent supreme commander of this campaign to encircle and suppress the pirate Empress, Rear Admiral of the Navy Headquarters, Kebi. Damn. I just can't understand how lazy and careless these recruits are. The lieutenant colonel, whose face was covered with scars, sighed heavily. In the past, because of his negligence, he missed a pirate hiding among the civilians. As a result, after the Navy left, the frenzied pirate actually slaughtered the innocent residents of the entire town. Not even a 3-year-old child was left alive. The grass outside the town was immediately stained red with blood. After that, he pierced his own cheek with a sharp knife to remind himself to keep a high degree of concentration at all times. It was also because of this that he was able to perceive the seriousness of the problem the moment he saw the report. It has already happened, and it is useless to pursue it. The most important thing at the moment is to find out as soon as possible the true identity of the man who sneaked in. Also, the filming task has almost been completed, and we can start inviting those reporters back. Kebi's handsome face revealed a faint worry. I hope that during this critical period of siege and arrest of the 9 snake pirates, that guy who sneaks in won't cause too much trouble. Learn. The scar-faced lieutenant colonel did not dare to be negligent, so he detained 2 recruits who were still stuck on the wall and dared not move, and began to investigate the identity of the man who sneaked into Girls Island. On the other hand, Amazon Lily, in the reception hall of 9 Snake City. All the cadres of the 9 snake pirates were present, holding longbows and weapons, standing on both sides of the hall with cold faces. At the end of the line was an upward ladder, and at the end of the ladder, 2 tall figures over 4 meters tall stood proudly. One of them was a giant with green hair, with his hands folded over his chest, and the snake's unique slender tongue slipped out from the corner of his mouth and hung down in the air. The other person has orange hair and a thick waist, with a knife in his right hand, his sharp eyes exuding the ferocity of a beast all the time. Both of them are very recognizable appearance features, so that Mr. 3 recognized it immediately when he first stepped into the hall. They are the core cadres of the 9 snake pirates, the 2 younger sisters of Empress Hancock. Both Boa Sandersonia and Boa Marigold are capable users of the snake fruit. This invisible sense of oppression, I saw it with my own eyes, it really is a huge gap from the animation. However, since these 2 people appeared, the one sitting in the middle must be Hancock, right? With the infinite anticipation of witnessing the most beautiful woman in the world, Mr. 3 concentrated his eyes and looked towards the gap between the Boa sisters. Faintly, one can see a giant pink boa constrictor coiled up into a seat, with only a weird snake head exposed. On the seat, sits this beautiful figure. The simple dressing style shows the incomparable devil's figure to the greatest extent, and people can't help but think about it again and again. The pure white curly roots are crystal clear, and they are freely draped over the shoulders, showing a smooth and elegant look. A pair of black and beautiful big eyes are shining with shrewd light, matching with that unique pretty face. It is simply a perfect match, and can be called a stunner in the world. What a ghost. Looking at the crumpled old woman who was less than 1.5 meters tall and wrinkled on the back of the boa constrictor, Mr. 3 felt that the expectations he was full of were petrified in an instant, sank into the bottom of his heart, and then flowed out along the stomach, turning into a fart. Puff. Almost at the same time as Mr. 3's fart was released, a snow-white and flawless long leg swept across, kicking the old woman on the back of the python flying away with lightning speed. Afterwards, when the clouds and mists were cleared to see the bright moon, a peerless beauty who was extremely beautiful stepped out slowly with her proud chest upright, her legs crossed, and she sat on the seat coiled up by the pink python in an extremely domineering posture. A head of jet black long hair hangs down the back like a waterfall, and her hairstyle is combed in the front. The slightly wide forehead is smooth and flat, the dark blue eyes are flawless, the corners of the eyes are slender and delicate, and the almond eyes reveal a little coldness. The bridge of the nose is high, the nose is small, and the lips are soft without any wrinkles. A pair of snake-shaped golden earrings were worn under the ears, and they collided with the twisting of the waist, making a tinkling sound. The cheongsam style plus the snow-white cloak clothing perfectly outlines the 1.9-meter-long figure to perfection. If the body has a rank, then the person in front of him is definitely a super king. The moment she appeared, even the air was stagnant, and the surrounding light seemed to avoid the beauty, and instantly became dim. Baki pirates, Mr. 3, in this special period when the Shichibukai system is completely abolished, what is your purpose for coming to Amazon Lily? Hancock raised his slender palm and gently stroked the strands of hair that fell on his side face. There is an unconcealable arrogance in the elegant and pleasant voice, even if he just asks a question softly. Mr. 3, who is below, feels the pressure, and his heart can't help beating violently. If you say that the moment you see the pirate queen with your own eyes, it is the stunning and chicken movement of the world's #1 beauty. Then after this sentence, all that is left is the insignificance and fear when facing the prehistoric giant beast. She used domineering? No. The cadres of the 9 snake pirates around them all exude fierce and domineering aura. From the corner of Mr. 3's eyes, he glanced at the cadres of the pirates on both sides, and his eyes widened involuntarily. Reflected under the goggles are 2 rows of beautiful female warriors, which can be seen from Mr. 3's perspective at this time. But they are wild and violent man-eating beasts. Although it is not domineering, the combination of this long-time killing momentum is quite exaggerated. If Mr. 3 hadn't inherited what Mr. 3 saw and heard during the Dingshang War, he might have been crushed to the knees by this aura. For good people who have gone through all kinds of hardships to come here to help you resolve the crisis at the risk of being captured by the Navy, your way of welcoming is quite distinctive. Against the pressure of the members of the 9 snake pirates, Mr. 3 looked up at Hancock, who was above him. Even if he pulls his hips again, he is still a cadre of the Shicibukai pirates. If he shrinks back from this simple aura, what is the recruitment? I'd rather die. Boa Hancock, my visit this time is sweet and sweet. Before Mr. 3 could finish speaking, Hancock, who was in the high position, suddenly stood up and made a heart-shaped gesture with his hands. Whoosh. Unexpectedly, Mr. 3's complexion changed drastically, and he just wanted to dodge to avoid it, but he didn't expect that the peach-pink love light shining from Hancock's palm was so fast that it enveloped his entire body in the blink of an eye. The next second, with a muffled sound of hum, Mr. 3 was petrified on the spot and turned into a stone sculpture. The name of a concubine is something that a dirty and ugly man like you can call directly? Glancing at Mr. 3, who had turned into stone, Hancock swung the cloak behind him and turned around smartly. Throw him into the sea and feed the fish. A cold, emotionless voice came from the beautiful back and fell into the ears of all members of the 9 snake pirates. What? The members of the 9 snake pirates looked up at Lord Snake, who turned away, and then glanced at Mr. 3, who was turned into a stone sculpture in the field. The protector of the country on Daughter Island has never been to the sea, and they don't know that the Bucky pirates and their cadres are normal. But as they have been fighting with the Empress for many years, they have already heard of it. In these 2 shocking events, such as making a fuss about the impregnated city prison, and broadcasting the war on the top, this Mr. 3 participated in the whole process, and was even the second mastermind besides Bucky the Clown. What's more, after gathering countless powerhouses and becoming Shicibukai, the Bucky pirates have become famous for the past 2 years. Not to mention that Mr. 3 wanted to help them, even if the 2 sides had nothing to do with them. They hurriedly threw this kind of character into the sea to feed the fish, causing the Bucky pirates and their underground forces to retaliate. For them, who have now been deprived of the title of Shicibukai, it is tantamount to making things worse. However, it is not easy for them to disobey the orders of Lord Snake G, and they do not dare to disobey. Sheji, it's not good to do this. Our current state is already quite bad. If he really came to help us. Just when many members of the pirate group were in a dilemma, Granny Zaw, who was kicked by Hancock earlier, raised her hands hard, pushed herself out of the wall, and landed safely. What the hell? Hancock, who was walking slowly back to the room, stopped, but did not look back. Forget those hypocritical and stupid navies, even you, have you forgotten? The reason why we can become Shicibukai is because we are strong enough. From Hancock's point of view, with the qualifications of a king, she did not put the navy outside the sea in her eyes at all. Even if the opponent is aggressive and has secret weapons, she is still confident that she can wipe out the opponent. And the Bucky pirates, who are also in the Shicibukai Sea, actually came uninvited and boasted that they would help them evacuate safely. This is simply an insult to such a strong and arrogant her. This is also the fundamental reason why she did not hesitate to make a move to petrify Mr. 3 and throw it into the sea to feed the fish. The clown Bucky pirates. What kind of people are you? Dare to intervene in concubine affairs? The mother-in-law stopped and found her snake crutch to support it on the ground. With hindsight, she realized that she had used too much force when she pushed out from the wall just now and flashed to her waist. You are indeed strong, and the 9 snake pirates are not afraid of the artillery bombardment of the warships outside, but what about the country under our feet? What about the residents of Amazon Lily, big and small? Facing the question from the soul of her mother-in-law, Hancock just turned his head sideways, revealing a beautiful profile. After a few seconds of silence, she spoke slowly. Country. Residents? If you can't beat them, let them all die. Anyway, they will definitely forgive me, because my concubine. It's so beautiful. The cold and almost heartless words echoed throughout the hall, resounding in the hearts of everyone present. The members of the 9 snake pirates lowered their heads with low expressions and did not refute. The 2 sisters Boya Sandasonia and Boya Marigold moved their lips, but they couldn't think of words to persuade. Why did my mother-in-law frown, and she watched Hancock grow up in front of her? How could she not know his true thoughts? Snake Princess. Just when Granny Zaw was about to speak, another unexpected voice came out ahead of everyone. You are not the kind of cold-blooded and heartless person, so let's listen to my suggestion first. Hearing the slightly wretched male voice in this joy, Hancock was startled, raised his eyes suddenly, and looked at the Mr. 3 stone sculpture below the hall. Click. Under the shocked and amazed gazes of everyone, a crack silently appeared on the head of the human-shaped stone sculpture, and then spread to all parts of its body like spider silk. When the crack reached the limit, there was a muffled bang. The entire stone statue was completely shattered, and the stone chips fell to the ground. Maybe, is it really worth a try? Mr. 3 shakes his body and shakes off the candle blocks covering the surface of his skin. He folded his arms around his chest, raised his head and looked at Hancock's projected gaze. The waxed goggles gleamed, revealing the confidence and composure of their owner at this time. In the moment of being enveloped by the sweet wind, by covering the whole body with a layer of candles, to avoid the effect of petrification. He's the number 2 person in the Bucky Pirates. It's not that easy to deal with. Hancock stared at Mr. 3. Although he was shocked by Mr. 3's extreme reaction, he was more angry at his self-righteous words. I'm not cold-blooded and heartless. Hancock turned his slender and fair legs and took a step forward, with undisguised anger flowing in the depths of his beautiful eyes. It's just that you escaped the petrification. What do you think you are? Do you know me well? The domineering arrogance of the strong horse training suddenly burst out, sweeping the audience with an indescribable sense of suffocation. Many members of the 9 snake pirates immediately felt pressured, and a little cold sweat oozes out of their smooth foreheads. They had already learned the domineering of Lord Snake G, and they quickly lowered their heads to the lowest point, not daring to look at Hancock, who was flying wildly at the top of his shirt. As the main target of this terrifying aura, Mr. 3, who was located below, widened his eyes, his heart was beating violently, and the blood all over his body was restless. Obviously not a substantive attack, but it can be clearly felt that the surrounding air pressure is extremely oppressive, as if it has suddenly increased several levels. What followed was a feeling of fear and suffocation that was even more oppressive than sinking into the dark deep sea, as if you were going to die in the next second. This is the real domineering arrogance of the pirate world, which is really exaggerated. Mr. 3 gritted his teeth, his wide eyes bloodshot. Thanks to the courage inherited from Mr. 3, he barely resisted Hancock's tyrannical attack. When I came back to my senses, sweat had soaked my chest and back. The mother-in-law leaned on a snake cane, twisted her neck and twisted her waist, and walked to Hancock with a strange posture. Perhaps it was because he knew how troublesome it was to provoke a powerful Shicibukai at this time, Or perhaps it was because he saw Mr. Three's courage to fight against the Overlord domineering and unshakable. She thought for a while, and Shen Sheng said to Hancock, who wanted to continue shooting. Forget it, Snake Girl. Let's listen to his opinion. No matter what this man represents behind the scenes is the Bucky pirates and their huge size. Underground forces. Hearing this, Hancock stood there without saying a word. Although she usually doesn't care about how her mother-in-law beats and scolded her, deep down, she still respects the savior who brought her back to her daughter's island from the vast sea. After seriously thinking about the pros and cons, Hancock regained his domineering aura and sat down on the pink python seat again. Tell me about your so-called proposal. The damn oppression instantly vanished. Mr. Three breathed a sigh of relief, and after briefly sorting out his chaotic thoughts, he spoke slowly. Obviously, after the Shicibukai system is abolished, there must be a big move behind the Navy. By then, the world will usher in the craziest era, and pirates from all sides will be restless. Even the 4 emperors who are known as the Emperors of the Sea will inevitably be involved as well. And the idea of our Bucky pirates, is to gather as powerful a force as possible to strengthen itself before this crazy era comes. Like us, the old and new Shicibukai, who have been regarded as abandoned children, should unite to be able, or to be more precise, to be qualified to stand firm in the turbulent future and save lives. At this point, many members of the 9 snake pirates looked a little moved. Now they are being surrounded and blocked by naval warships, they actually feel what Mr. Three called the craziest era. The Shicibukai system has existed for a long time and is deeply ingrained. How can it be said that it will be abolished when it is abolished? Granny Zaw, who was standing next to Hancock, also nodded slightly. She had a great view of the overall situation. In fact, she had already considered the feasibility of forming alliances with other Shicibukai. Going deeper, the reason why the Navy launched an attack on the Shicibukais at the same time with lightning speed after announcing the abolition of the Shicibukai system, in fact, has its own concerns in this regard. But what she never expected was that the Bucky pirates, who are also in the Shicibukai Sea, would take the lead, ignore many scruples, and send people over in advance. Who is the terrifying powerhouse who stayed on the one-piece ship? That clown Bucky's forward-looking vision and courage are far beyond anything other people can match. The mother-in-law naturally thought that Mr. Three's behavior was the instigation of its Captain Bucky, and she couldn't help but feel a deep admiration and fear in her heart. Well, the brain supplement object of Bucky the Clown +1. What's your opinion? Hancock did not respond directly to Mr. Three, but turned to ask Granny. She has never been good at analyzing the situation and judging the direction of the world. At first, she simply thought that the reason why the world government abolished the Shicibukai was only because they had super weapons that could replace the position of the Shicibukai. But Mr. Three's simple words really gave her a strong sense of crisis. Once the long-standing world pattern is broken, it will definitely affect more than just a few Shichibukai pirates. In the follow-up of the world government, there will definitely be more tough and drastic actions. In this case, the alliance is indeed the best choice to ensure itself. For a time, Hancock, who had a tough attitude, was a little unsure. She is very confident and conceited about her strength and beauty, but she is not blind. Of course, it is 3% impossible for our proud and noble Empress to directly agree with Mr. Three's opinion. Therefore, the tool man, Zoppo, came in handy. Madame Zaw saw through Hancock's thoughts almost instantly, nodded and said, I have considered the matter of holding a group between the 7 seas to keep warm, but it is too difficult to implement and there are too many variables, so I did not follow you. Discuss. But since the clown Bucky pirates took the initiative, it can indeed be considered. Bold. I saw Hancock, who was sitting on the pink python, his face sank, and he asked in a cold voice, whether it is the Navy headquarters, or the pirate power, what do you think? The combat power of a concubine is already weak enough to be needed. Are you seeking cooperation from others? Empress domineering, revealing. What about the world upheaval? I am still the center of the world. The members of the 9 snake pirates below saw that their Lord Snake G was so confident, and the sense of crisis in their hearts suddenly decreased a lot. Yup. Their captain, but the pirate Empress who has the arrogance of a domineering and can deal with any situation at any time, Boyahan Cook. Wife dare not. Zoppo hurriedly bowed her head and said respectfully, Sir Snake G is unparalleled in combat power. Naturally you don't need to help others, but I think the Bucky pirates even sent their #1 character over, and they were the first to look for us. Full of sincerity and worth of cooperation. Of course, the premise is that they have the ability to help us solve the current predicament of Daughter's Island. Hearing this, the displeasure on Hancock's pretty face faded a little, and he turned to look at Mr. 3 below. Since the mother-in-law said so, then I will agree with your statement. The residents living in the Amazon Lily are all my supporters. I can discard them at will. It doesn't matter how much I die, but you, as allies, can't. So, let's talk about it. How do you plan to transfer the people on the island? Immediately, all eyes focused on Mr. 3 again. Mr. 3 raised his hand and rubbed his forehead, feeling extremely troublesome. This double read sung by Hancock and Granny Zaw instantly changed the situation from the Bucky pirates take the initiative to help the 9 snake pirates to solve the crisis, to the 9 snake pirates versus the Bucky pirates alliance eligibility test. Directly turned passive into active. Before coming to Amazon Lily, Mr. 3 thought he had taken Hancock very seriously. But after some contact, he still seriously underestimated the scheming and ability of this pirate queen. It is very different from the image of domineering and powerful but cute love brain portrayed in anime. It can be seen that the characters in this world are not as fixed and simple as seen in anime. Compared with two-dimensional, the people here live more realistically, and are more cunning and cunning. What's even more difficult is that the ultimate purpose of Mr. 3's trip is not to cooperate with alliances, but to recruit superiors and subordinates. This is his meow, and the pairs are soaring upwards. The way to transfer people on the island is simple. Mr. 3 sighed heavily. He had no choice. Facing such a handsome Hancock, he could only take a step by step. Hopefully, her setting of fear of the heavenly dragons and the slave brand won't change too much. You only need to use your ability to petrify all the residents of the island, then I will coat all the stone statues with thick waterproof candles for protection, and finally, through the 2 sea snakes of your pirate group, I will secretly transfer everyone to the seabed designated just the location. There's our Bucky Express mercenary team there to take care of it. In order to make his words more convincing, Mr. 3 stepped out with his right foot, and the 3-character hairstyle on his head ignited with a hum sound. Immediately after that, centered on the area where the soles of his feet landed, the floor of the entire hall was instantly covered with thick and sticky candles. Hee, it's quite a useful ability. It's a good way, but before the specific implementation. After seeing Mr. 3's fruit ability, Hancock stopped talking, slowly stood up from the python's back, tilted his head, and looked at Mr. 3 below him casually. I also want to see, as the #2 character of the Bucky Pirates, whether your fighting ability is as powerful as your brain. As soon as these words came out, Mr. 3's nerves were tense, and the candle flames that had been extinguished above his head blazed again. Sure enough, the battle phase that should come is still unavoidable. Sandasonia, Marigold, treat the guests from afar. With a wave of Hancock's jade hand, Sandasonia and Marigold, who were guarding both sides, stepped forward and activated the fruit ability directly. Under the blessing of the snake and snake fruit python form and the snake and snake fruit cobra form, the already huge body became larger and bloated. The snake-like facial contour and the thick snake tail opened the air, exuding the unique ferocity of cold-blooded animals, with brutality. Yes, sister. The two swayed the snake's tail at a fast speed, and attacked Mr. 3 with a strong chill. Good come. Mr. 3's fighting spirit is surging, standing on the flowing candle liquid, using the giant candle glove as a spear and the surrounding candle wall as a shield, facing the snake sisters head-on. Traveling through the world of pirates, how can you miss a hearty battle? He is not Mr. 3's coward who can avoid it. Whoosh whoosh. As soon as Sandasonia and Marigold launched the attack, the members of the 9 snake pirates retreated one after another, leaving enough open space in the middle area. As soon as they stood firm, there was a violent roar from the center of the hall, and the whole ground trembled. In the field, the first person to arrive in front of Mr. 3 was the cobra-shaped Marigold. I saw her holding the daguan knife in her hand and slashing at Mr. 3's neck at an extremely fierce angle. Mr. 3 looked calm, raised his hand and hooked, and manipulated the wall of fluid candles surrounding his body to concentrate in front of him instantly. Boom. The daguan knife with cold light on its blade slashed straight at the candle wall, bursting with tremors. This candle looks soft, but I didn't expect it to have such hardness after being instantly hardened. Marigruder's serpentine vertical pupils shrank suddenly, and she immediately changed her moves, holding the guandao with one hand, and clenched her fist with the other free hand. There was a muffled sound of hum, and it was covered with a domineering armed color. The huge fist that had turned pitch black in the strong wind slammed into the wall of the candle made by Mr. 3. Boom. The wall of candles, which could resist violent slashing head-on, was smashed to pieces by the unpretentious big fist of Marie Goruder in the moment of touching it, and it was blown into pieces of shattered candle slag. Affected by this shock, Mr. 3, who was hiding behind, had to take a few steps back, in order to avoid the deceptive pursuit that Marie Groud might launch. But this also caught him off guard and fell into the trap of another giant snake. A huge shadow shrouded down, and the thick black mesh-shaped snake tail hurriedly attacked, wrapping Mr. 3, who was in a retreating state, around the middle. Sizzle. The strong and firm tail muscles contracted violently, representing the strangling power of the giant beast, as if to crush the captured prey in an instant. Hee, Mr. 3, there is more than one opponent for you. Sandasonia, with her long green hair flying, sneered, her fork-shaped tongue slipping on the corner of her mouth matched with two barbed fangs, giving a chilling and gloomy aura. Look at me like this, twist your frail body into a rag. She flexed her tail muscles violently, and her vertical snake pupils stared at Mr. 3's back. If you really can't stand it, just surrender. It's hard for me to explain to my sister when I die. Before that, can you please take a look at my face, as if I'm about to die? Mr. 3, who was bound, turned his head slowly, showing a calm expression with a paralyzed face. Without giving Sandasonia too much time to react, the ability of the waxy fruit was activated instantly. Countless liquid candles continued to overflow from Mr. 3's body, and in the blink of an eye, they covered Sandasonia's huge snake tail and body as much as possible. Feeling the warmth from the fluid candle, Sandasonia felt bad, and wanted to distance himself by releasing Mr. 3. However, under Mr. 3's control, the speed at which the candle solidified was far beyond her judgment. Accompanied by the scorching heat released by the fluid candle when it solidified, a female snake figure with a size of more than 10 meters appeared in the center of the hall. If you look closely, you can even see the shock and panic on Sandasonia's giant snake face through the wax figure. From Sandasonia's surprise attack to when she was condensed into a wax figure, the whole process only took a few seconds. Is this the strength of the second character of the Bucky Pirates, who is the same as Lord Snakeheim in the Shichibukai? Actually, in a single face-to-face, I controlled the fierce and strange Lord Sandasonia. The sister paper members of the 9 snake pirates who were watching the battle were all shocked, and when they looked at the unremarkable man in the field again, they couldn't help but have more fear in their eyes. Compared to their shock, Hancock in the high position supported his head with one hand, and his beautiful cheeks were full of leisurely indifference. She took the clear tea handed over by the attendant next to her and tasted it lightly. Although the 2 younger sisters are not strong, they are not weak enough to be Mr. 3 for a split second. At least, in terms of the current Mr. 3's expressiveness, it is far from enough. Sandasonia. Seeing that the second sister was under control, Mariagrud shouted, slashed head-on with both knives, and came to support. Unlike the first attack, this time she no longer has any spare strength, and she covers the blade with a domineering look of armament. The huge figure came. Mr. 3 did not advance but retreated. The candle in his hand changed rapidly, turning into a huge double-edged axe almost the size of his body. The candle axe, which was supposed to be as white as jade, exuded a faint pitch-black color. Although it is possible to use candle walls for defense, in order to better compare the strength of his armed colors, Mr. 3 chose to fight head-on with Marigold, who has an advantage in his own strength. Boom. The candle giant axe and the black knife cut through the air and collided fiercely. Immediately, sparks popped up. In the spark, the 2 blades squeezed each other, both trying to crush each other. Click. After a stalemate for a few seconds, Mr. 3, whose armed color was only in the budding stage, couldn't stand it. In addition to the hardness of the candle itself, is my armed color domineering only to this extent? Double color domineering half a bucket of water. Fruit ability development is also mediocre. Mr. 3, this guy is really confusing. Mr. 3, whose weapon was broken, did not panic at all, and even complained about the laziness of the original Mr. 3 in his heart. Uncle Huang, the human yellow ape, is a fake laziness with a well-earned salary, and the 4 emperors have done nothing. If he is really lazy, he has to look at the 3rd brother. You bastard, it's me, Boya Marigold, who is fighting with you. How can I perfunctory me with such a low-level armament that children play at home? Feeling that she was completely underestimated, Marigold's eyes glowed with scarlet light, and blue veins burst out on the snake man's face. Sizzle. There was a faint smell of burning in the air. Mr. 3 looked up and saw that the golden curly hair behind Marie Goruder was ablaze with raging flames, condensing into fire snakes bathed in flames in the frantic dance. Snake hair possessed. Snake god of flames. In response to Mr. 3's arrogance, Marigold didn't even use the venom attack that he was best at, and directly liberated the strongest state of the snake fruit, cobra form. Actually, I didn't underestimate you, it was just now that I was at the limit of my armed arrogance. Looking at the furious Marie growled, Mr. 3 thought for a while, but in the end he didn't make this sincere explanation, he was afraid of blowing the little girl's lungs out. Second sister, let's fight quickly. Marigold, who incarnated the serpent god of fire, shouted at Sandasonia, who had solidified into a wax figure. As the most intimate companion, she is very aware of Sandasonia's combat power, and it is absolutely impossible for a single candle to block her actions. Click click. Sure enough, after hearing Marigorod's call, Sandasonia's candle statue began to tremble, which intensified. The seemingly indestructible candle was broken out of cracks under the influence of terrifying power. Afterwards, countless green snake heads made of hair condensed, bursting the candle statue with a ferocity like breaking ice, revealing terrifyingly sharp fangs in the scattered wax blocks. Mr. 3, you bastard, are you ready to die? Against the emerald green snake head, Sandasonia's huge snake face was full of ferocity. This is her strongest form, possessed by snake hair, Orochi. The snake men sisters stood side by side again, and the strong and powerful snake tails propped them up high, blocking the lights of the hall. Carrying a terrifying sense of oppression, a terrifying shadow full of snake hair swaying was cast down, and the thin Mr. 3 could only look up and look at the 2 sisters. In a sense, this was the first time he had seen such a terrifying monster with his own eyes, but for some reason, his heart was inexplicably calm, without the slightest panic. Facing the menacing Sandasonia and Marigold, Mr. 3 held up his goggles, and his whole body became restless involuntarily. The navy outside didn't know when the general attack would be launched, so he didn't hold back any longer, and planned to use the trick he found out after half an hour of special training on an unknown island. Exactly, but give it a try, the power of this trick. Candle wall. Mr. 3 shouted loudly, and the candles poured out frantically under his feet, forming a candle wall nearly 2 meters high around it, separating the members of the 9 snake pirates who were watching the battle, leaving only him and the snake sisters to stay inside. The power of this move is not small, and he has not fully grasped it. If it affects other members of the 9 snake pirates, the impact will not be very good. After having no worries, Mr. 3 clenched his right fist and increased the ability of the wax fruit to the maximum. Puff puff. Ding Kong's flame on his head burned violently, and the next second, the overwhelming liquid candles spewed out of his fists like they didn't need money. The liquid candles rolled in the air and gradually condensed into a giant candle fist that was no smaller than the size of Sandasonia and Marigold. Seeing this, Sandasonia and Marigruder's eyes and pupils were all condensed, and they were ready to take on Mr. 3's move with the strongest posture. The animal system instinctively told them that this move should be avoided, but this battle was the strength test of the 9 snake pirates against the Bucky pirates, and they had an advantage in number with 2 enemies in 1. If they avoided it because of fear at this time, it would be a humiliation for them who are arrogant by nature. In the high position, the leisurely calmness on Hancock's face has disappeared. She slowly put down the teacup without being blocked too much, and looked at Mr. 3 who was holding a giant fist of fluid candles on the field. Aside from the exaggeratedly large candles, she caught some dark black dots mixed in the inside of the huge fist with her wicked gaze. That is definitely not the influence of the domineering of the armed color, it is more like tiny gunpowder. And, I don't know if it's my illusion, why is his posture? Hancock stood up slowly, staring solemnly at Mr. 3 holding a giant fist of flowing candles. A figure flashed in the back of his mind involuntarily. How similar is it to a former admiral? If Mr. 3 at this time heard the Empress muttering to herself full of doubts, she would definitely be shocked. Because the trick he figured out is to use the characteristics of burning candles to release thousands of degrees of high temperature, adding the raw material gunpowder of Bucket's Maki bombs, and learning from the killing of Akainu, the former admiral and the current admiral of the Navy. Move, and then develop a high attack method. You have to be careful. Next, it's birthday time. Under the horrified gazes of Sandersonia and Marigold, the corners of Mr. 3's mouth curled into a faint smile, and he tilted his head in a dashing movement, causing the flames from the three-shaped hairstyle above his head to fall on the giant candle fist. At the moment of contact with the open flame, the tiny gunpowder mixed on the surface of the giant candle was ignited, and bursts of flames exploded. The flames ignited the inner candle for the first time, causing it to release a terrifyingly high-temperature flame. The flames that suddenly spewed out detonated the gunpowder inside, and the gunpowder and the candles progressed layer by layer, burning each other. The final picture formed from this was Mr. 3 held high the flowing, flaming magma-like fists that burst from time to time. It's called Candle, Big Fire. When the burning and bursting state of the candle giant fist reached the limit, Mr. 3 jumped up and slammed it towards the Snake Sisters. Boom. A huge explosion resounded throughout the hall, and the fire was soaring into the sky. The candles burned violently to form billowing white smoke, which filled the place with a suffocating white mist. Whoosh whoosh. Countless candle blocks that were still burning were scattered, and some of them dripped on the floor, flickering with sparks. The wall of candles that blocked the members of the 9 snake pirates was also completely melted by this terrifying blasting force and high temperature, leaving only a mess everywhere. The powerful female warriors of the 9 snake pirates were all stunned and dumbfounded, standing in the original place speechless. Following their unbelievably horrified gazes, they saw that Sandersonia and Marigold, the 2 9 snake pirates who were in charge of combat power, had long since been released from their snake humanization and returned to their normal state. Kneeling on the ground, breathing heavily. Although it looks a little embarrassed, if you look closely, apart from the red burns on the body, the two actually did not suffer too much fatal injuries. The biggest feature of the animal-type devil fruit ability is that the skin is rough and the flesh is thick, and their armed colors are not weak, so they can face the candle fire breathing, developed by Mr. 3. But even so, judging from the degree of damage to the entire venue, the power of this move is indeed powerful. If most of the shocks were not concentrated on the Boya sisters, the magnificent palace with a solid structure would have to be completely demolished with this punch. Opposite Sandersonia and Marigold, Mr. 3's own state is not very good. The right arm that was naturally hanging by his side was slightly red, and solid candle residues kept falling from it. Although he was using his full strength to fire the candle, he covered his entire right arm with a domineering look of armament and protected it with the strongest solid candle arm guard. But it was still not completely isolated, the high-temperature shock that erupted under the interaction of the explosive and the candle. It takes a certain amount of singing time, and at the same time, it may cause damage to itself. This is the biggest flaw of this candle fire. Of course, correspondingly, Mr. 3 is quite satisfied with its power. In this way, the next direction of strengthening should be the control of the candle fruit, and the cultivation of the domineering and domineering. Through this battle with the Boya sisters, Mr. 3 successfully determined the goal at this stage. As for seeing and hearing, it can be pushed back a little bit. After all, the attack and defense can't keep up. Even if you can predict the future in advance, you will only see yourself a few seconds earlier. It's really an exaggerated fruit ability. Sandersonia shook her head, and after dispelling the residual dizziness, she slowly stood up. Beside her, Marigold also picked up his own sword, staring at Mr. 3, and he was likely to continue fighting until the winner was decided. Seeing the increased fighting intent on the faces of the two, Mr. 3 felt a headache. The animal department is still difficult to deal with. Of course, if he fights again, he is not afraid. Just when the two sides were ready to fight again, Hancock in the high position waved his hand and stopped. Sandersonia, Marigold, that's enough. The purpose of the test has been achieved. From this man, we can already roughly see the fighting strength of the Bucky pirates. For the pirate Empress who is well informed and has experienced countless battles, Mr. 3's punch just now is stunning enough, and even has a little shadow of the Admiral Akainu's move, but it is limited to this and cannot give what a shock she brought. The powerhouses in the New World are like clouds, and there are not a few guys who can display that level of destructive power. What really made Hancock end the trial ahead of schedule was Mr. Three's initiative to use the candle wall to separate the other members of the pirate group around. Strength is important, but if you enter into a so-called alliance with a brutal person who has no scruples and uses his abilities recklessly, he will only add trouble to himself. Yes, sister. A trace of regret flashed across Sandersonia and Marigold's faces at the same time, and they immediately removed the strong fighting spirit from their bodies. Obviously, they didn't have enough fun, but for her sister's orders, she absolutely and unconditionally obeyed. Then, as I said, Hancock, who was sitting in a high position, supported his head with one hand, and his smooth black hair still fell naturally. She looked away from the two younger sisters and landed on Mr. Three further ahead. The trial is over. In the name of the Emperor of the Amazon Lily Kingdom and the head of the 9 Snake Pirates, I agree to the alliance request made by the Bucky Pirates. The voice fell, and the mother-in-law, who was standing beside the Empress, let out a sigh of relief with a smile on her face. The arrogant snake princess can take a step back and choose to form an alliance with the other Shicibukai, which is definitely a great guarantee for the safety of the residents of the entire Amazon Lily. Alliance. Are we really going to ally with Bucky the Clown Pirate? Why do I feel a little unreal? I didn't expect that we would have real allies. But to be honest, the strength of this Mr. Three is indeed very strong, but I don't know how powerful their Captain Bucky will be. Ah, Lord Snake G's posture makes me cry. The beautiful warriors of the 9 Snake Pirates also became restless. There are those who are excited about the fact that the two pirates are united as an alliance, and there are those who are worried about the next upheaval in the world, and even Hancock's loyal female fans protrude 2 pink love eyeballs with a happy face. But no matter what the mood is, everyone agrees that the alliance of the two pirates is a sure thing, and there will never be any accidents. However, if there is no accident, the accident is coming. Well, sorry Hancock, maybe there was some problem with my statement at the beginning, which caused you to misunderstand. Actually, looking at the emotional 9 Snake Pirates, Mr. Three touched his nose embarrassedly. In Hancock's increasingly gloomy eyes, he bit the bullet and forced out the real intention of this visit. I came this time not to unite with you 9 Snake Pirates, but I hope you can join the Bucky Pirates and become a part of us. As soon as these words came out, everyone in the hall was shocked. Including the 2 sisters Sandersonia and Marigold, all the members of the 9 Snake Pirates who were talking in a low voice were stunned on the spot. Their eyeballs popped out of their sockets in unison, with an exaggerated expression that was frightened to the limit. This. The mother-in-law widened her cloudy eyes, thinking that she had heard the wrong thing behind her ears. Thinking of this, she raised her hand and clasped her ears without any grace. Looking down, she saw that her fingertips were empty, and there was no earwax blocking her eardrums. Recruit the 9 Snake Pirates and make the Pirate Queen become someone else's subordinate? Is this Mr. Three of the Bucky Pirates living in a dream? How dare he? In addition to being shocked, the mother-in-law, who realized that the situation was wrong, quickly raised her head and looked at Hancock sitting on the back of the python. Hee hee, ah. As if hearing a big joke, Hancock held his forehead with one hand, and then sneered a few times with a slightly trembling body. Afterwards, she couldn't help but stand tall and proud of her size. Without the image of the first beauty of pirates, she looked up and laughed. What a funny joke, I have forgotten, when was the last time I heard such a funny joke, ha ha ha. Mr. Three, are you sure you're not joking, or were you just concussed by your own candle fist? Seeing the unmoving serious expression on Mr. Three's face under the high platform, Hancock's expression froze, and the exaggerated arc raised by the corner of his mouth was restrained. She threw the cloak behind her, stood up slowly, and walked down the high platform step by step. In the depths of the beautiful eyes, there was a cloud of darkness and anger that was visible to the naked eye. You really want to recruit a concubine? Feeling the terrifying aura hidden under the calm face of Lord Snake G, all the members of the 9 Snake Pirates immediately tightened their bodies and did not dare to make any movement. Some kind-hearted people have begun to silently pray for Mr. Three in their hearts, not to die too miserably later, at least leave a whole body. The entire hall fell into a dead silence, save for the crunch of Hancock's high heels stepping on the wooden steps. The sound fell in Mr. Three's ears, and it seemed extremely harsh. But he had no choice but to keep his eyes firmly fixed on Hancock, the female emperor who came slowly to his side. If you want to become handsome and strong quickly, you must bear such pressure. Finally, after a long torment, Hancock stopped less than 1 meter in front of Mr. Three. Looking at the world's #1 beauty so close at hand, at her flawless eyes, nose, lips, and the unfathomable ravine, Mr. Three's heartbeat intensified uncontrollably. Is this the aura of a strong man with a tyrannical color? I didn't expect it to be so powerful. Just getting close can affect my blood and make my heart beat so violently? Mr. Three couldn't help but sigh at the horror of the overlord. On the opposite side, seeing his blushing vulgar appearance, Hancock couldn't help but snorted and made up his mind. For your success in pleasing me, I'll give you a chance. After a pause, Hancock, who noticed that Mr. Three was not unexpectedly attracted by his beauty, said confidently. If you can ignore my petrified light without relying on the fruit ability and the arrogance of the armed color, the recruitment can be considered. Row. Mr. Three thought about it, and without much hesitation, agreed directly to Hancock's request. Compared with rejecting on the spot, at least this request still has a chance to win. Although this is actually not much different from the direct eviction order. Looking at the woman in front of her eyes, no matter her appearance, figure, or temperament, she is impeccable and extremely beautiful. Mr. Three really has no confidence and can resist petrochemical light. He is quite clear about his own virtue. Before crossing, he was still a social animal, and he once left a rhetoric in the comment area of a short video. I am Huang. I swear that I will never live with gambling and drugs. Well, the yellow word is not a word. As early as 10 minutes ago, Mr. Three had personally experienced the strangeness of Hancock's petrified light. If he hadn't reacted quickly at that time and used the wax fruit to avoid it, this would have long since become a stone sculpture. Not to mention, Hancock is in front of you at this moment, and the beauty of the first beauty in the pirate world is unparalleled. But even if the situation is quite serious, Mr. Three also believes that he should have the strength of a battle. After all, Hancock's fruit ability is not incomprehensible. Leaving aside the strange brain circuit of Luffy, which is different from ordinary people, there have been people who did not need to be opportunistic and resist the temptation of Hancock's charm head-on. That's right, he is the Vice Admiral of the Navy headquarters who came to Daughter Island to pick up Hancock and go to Marine Fando to fight against Whitebeard before the war, Flying Squirrel. At that time, in the face of Hancock's sweet wind, the ruthless man directly pierced his palm with a knife. Divert attention through severe pain, forcibly stay awake from the state of charm, and successfully avoid petrification. Mr. Three knows that he can't be so cruel, but he can still cut his skin with a candle knife. He was afraid of pain, and his endurance was far less than that of Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel. After rounding up, the pain he felt when he pierced his skin was actually similar to piercing his palm. Furthermore, the first time I was irradiated by the petrochemical light was a bit of an unexpected factor. As long as I remain firm this time, don't be affected by Hancock's beauty, and use pain to divert attention at a critical moment, I can definitely do it. Thinking of this, Mr. Three's concerns gradually dissipated. The slightly wretched face gradually showed a calm and confident look. To be charmed by Hancock's beauty, you must either be as brainless as a secondhand, or you must be absolutely confident. Come on, boy Hancock, he took the initiative to challenge. Seeing his ready and confident appearance, Hancock snorted coldly, moved his slender legs, and took a few steps back. Afterwards, she raised her flawless hands on both sides of her face, and gently moved her green fingers like white jade, pulling the jet-black hair on her drooping cheeks behind her, so that her exquisite face was fully exposed, exposing herself to the in the air. Seeing this, Mr. Three's steady breathing began to appear a little disordered, but he was quickly suppressed by him and regained his composure. You want to shake my heart with just one action, Hancock, you must be underestimating a man's consciousness, right? The opposite Hancock was silent, put his hands in front of him, and made a gesture of love. In her sight, Mr. Three is right in the middle of the heart gesture, like a lamb trapped in a cage waiting to be slaughtered. For his own beauty, Hancock also has absolute confidence. Sweet. With a low drink from Hancock, cherry-pink light spots began to appear in the center of the heart gesture. Under the highly concentrated gaze of Mr. Three, the light spots quickly gathered and turned into bright pink light. This is the time. Mr. Three's pupils shrank suddenly, and a sharp candle knife condensed between his palms, stabbing his own skin without hesitation. Puff. A bloodstain several centimeters long appeared on the arm instantly, and the bloodshot that was pulled out dyed the tip of the candle knife red. The burning pain followed, hitting Mr. Three's nerves. What the hell? It really hurts, you bastard. Almost at the same time, the cherry-pink light arrived. Whoosh. The flow of time became extremely slow at this moment. In this almost static space, you can clearly see the tension and anxiety on the faces of the mother-in-law and the members of the 9 snake pirates. Although Hancock's fruit ability is very perverted, it is really hard to say against a strong and extremely confident person like Mr. Three. No matter what, they are also one of the top masters of the 7 Wu Sea pirates. They not only lurked in the advanced city prison with Bucky the Clown, and planned the prison escape incident, but also participated in the top battle between Whitebeard and the Navy headquarters. Get out. He is a cunning and courageous hero. Beauty, can it really make a difference when this man is highly concentrated and ready to go? How long can this man hold out in front of Lord Snakegi, who is also going all out to show his charm? 10 seconds? 20 seconds, or is it fully immune? Whoosh. Time flow returns to normal. Not surprisingly, the pink light went straight through Mr. Three's body. Everyone in the 9 snake pirates quickly looked up, and then all of them were stunned, so shocked that their jaws almost fell to the ground. They have thought of many possibilities, but they never imagined that it would be such a scene in front of them. Even Hancock himself, who launched the attack, had a rare look of disbelief on his pretty face. I saw Mr. Three standing calmly under her sweet light, not moving at all. How can that be? The mother-in-law, who was holding a snake crutch, muttered to herself. She raised her hand and rubbed her cloudy eyes, but did not find anything similar to eye mucus confusing her vision. There is no problem with the eyes, so what is going on with this picture in front of me? A man like Mr. Three, in a state of high concentration of defense, can't hold it for even half a second, and is turned into a stone sculpture at the moment of contact with the light. Whoosh whoosh. The breeze blew in from the window of the palace, passing over Hancock with his jet black hair fluttering, and blowing on Mr. Three, who had turned into a human-shaped stone statue, without making any movement. Really immovable. Facts have proved that Mr. Three still overestimated his ability, or to be more precise, underestimated his lust. There is no man in the world who is absolutely ascetic. If there is, then he must be a man. If this man retorts, then he is 100% a eunuch. Even a vice admiral with deep experience and decisive killing can hardly ignore the charm of Hancock's first beauty, let alone Mr. Three, an ordinary person who has crossed over from the real world. This is the nature of men, and it cannot be changed by simple self-confidence or pain. Swoosh. Feeling the embarrassed atmosphere, the breeze hurriedly speeded up and walked away from the other side of the window, making the hall, which was finally moving a bit, fall into silence again. After recovering from the shock, Hancock's expression was gloomy, and he walked to Mr. Three's stone statue step by step with a cold face. Silently, she raised her slender and firm right leg and aimed it at Mr. Three's abdomen and began to accumulate strength. Snake Princess. Calm down. The Bucky pirates are extremely powerful. Killing Mr. Three will only put us in a more embarrassing situation. The mother-in-law who reacted didn't care about her old waist, and rushed down the high platform to stop Hancock's attack. However, she was still a step behind her age. I saw it, Poochie, and Hancock's heavy kick has fallen, kicking straight on the abdomen of the stone statue Mr. Three. The stone statue Mr. Three was kicked out more than 10 meters away in an instant, smashed several potted plants along the way, and finally smashed heavily on the wall of the palace. Boom. In an instant, the sand and stones were flying, and the dust was everywhere. Cough, cough, cough. In the billowing smoke, Mr. Three, whose petrification state was lifted and his body was restored to flesh and blood, coughed a few times, raised his hand to push away the stone that was pressing on him, and stood up slowly, and there was no serious problem. Out of the safety of the 9 Snakes pirates and the entire Daughter Island people, Hancock still kept his feet after all. Obviously, Mr. Three, you failed. There is no need for the 9 Snake pirates to cooperate with you guys who live in dreams. The alliance is over, please come back. This is how it is done. Everyone, prepare for the battle. It's time to let those navies outside die. Hancock no longer pays any attention to Mr. Three, and with a handsome flick of the cloak behind him, he is about to walk out of the hall. Seeing this, Mr. 3 didn't care about the feeling of being petrified, and said almost subconsciously, "Hancock, I still." As soon as he made a sound, Hancock, who had already walked to the exit of the hall, frowned, and the granite floor under the high-heeled shoes was cracked by a strange force. She turned her head, and the depths of her beautiful eyes were filled with a red light full of anger. As the violent airflow erupted from around Hancock, the white cloak behind him moved without wind. The powerful and unparalleled overlord arrogance burst instantly. The resulting shock wave blew the crushed paraffin blocks on the ground, shattered the surrounding windows, and squeezed the air of the entire palace. "If we just met," Hancock used to show his arrogance and arrogance, like a tiger that is not angry and arrogant. So now this more terrifying atmosphere is a group of evil wolves full of fangs, ready to attack at any time. The two were completely incomparable. Puff. At the moment when he was enveloped by this domineering look, Mr. 3 only held on for a second before being unable to resist, and knelt down on one knee, blood spilling from the corner of his mouth. The power of the real liberation of the overlord domineering arrogance is so terrifying. Mr. 3 lowered his head and looked at his uncontrollably trembling hands, horrified. After all, he still underestimated the domineering arrogance of the overlord, the top ability in this pirate world. "Do you think that I really won't kill you?" The fully liberated Hancock did not want to give Mr. 3 time to adapt and took a step forward. Buzz. The invisible pressure acting on Mr. 3 immediately rose to a new level, pushing him back to the ground, who was barely supporting his back. This is not over yet. Hancock continued to move forward, and the overlord domineering momentum became more and more violent. When the last step fell, Mr. 3, who was kneeling on one knee, was suppressed to the point of being unable to move, and he couldn't even raise his head to look at Hancock, who came to him. In the blurred vision, only a pair of long legs can be seen close at hand. "Come on, Mr. 3, kneel now, and I can spare you not to die." Hancock's eyes were cold, and he looked down at Mr. 3 at his feet. At the same time when the word "death" emerged from the cherry lips, the domineering arrogance that erupted from him had completely exceeded the limit that Mr. 3 could bear. At this time, he could even clearly feel that his soul was trembling. As early as 2 years ago, Hancock was able to master the use of the overlord, and after 2 years of growth and practice, his overlord domineering has risen to more than one level. And this is the fundamental reliance on which she is still confident in the face of the encirclement and suppression of the naval headquarters. Only now, Mr. 3, who suddenly visited, helped the Navy experience this monster-like horror in advance. Under the suppression of Hancock, Mr. 3's head continued to roar, and the blurred vision began to become blank. The strength of the limbs was exhausted, the blood flow in the whole body was disordered, and the rest of the knees trembled and fell to the ground little by little. My limit, this is the end of it. Consciousness was on the verge of fainting and collapse. For some reason, Mr. 3 suddenly remembered his previous life. The colorless life of high school quizzes, the shy college time, and after graduation, he became a humble 996 wage earner. It's obviously disgusting, but when you see those bullshit leaders and bosses, you have to force a smiley face to flatter. He hated such a life, so he decisively threw his resignation letter on his boss's face, and went home to write a fan novel. Then, I can't even eat instant noodles. In this difficult environment, he inexplicably crossed into the current world of One Piece. I originally thought that with the system and the blessing of the plugin, I could make great progress all the way to the peak of my life, but unexpectedly, I was surrounded and killed by the Vice Admiral of the Navy headquarters together with Bucky and his gang at the beginning. After finally persuading Bucky and his group to cover their voyage, they tried their best to break through the naval blockade chain, and when they saw the pirate queen Hancock, they still threw themselves on the street at the most critical step. Perhaps it is to feel the pain and sadness of Mr. 3 at this time, and the memories belonging to the already negative Mr. 3 also emerged out of time. The experience of failure in the Baroque work club, the fear of being afraid in the advanced city and the war on the top, and the embarrassed scenes of hugging one's head and running away, and so on, countless down and down experiences have appeared in Mr. 3's mind, impacting his psychological defense line. It sucks. Just when Mr. 3 felt desperate and wanted to give up escaping like before, it was like a light flashed back. At a certain moment, his vision, which had already been blank, returned to a blurred state. He raised his head with great difficulty, and what he saw in the dimness was the unparalleled beauty of Hancock and Zhang Fenghua. At this time, the most beautiful face in the pirate world was full of disdain for the weak. At the moment of looking at those indifferent and beautiful eyes, Mr. Three's strong unwillingness and resentment were completely detonated. Do not. Mr. Three clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. Why? I have already crossed into the world of pirates, and I have to bow to this damn life and reality. Accept fate? Why should I accept my fate? If there really is a master in the world, why, that person can't be me. Yup. I clearly have a system, and I have an unparalleled overall view of the pirate world. Why should I be afraid to succumb to the mere tyrannical domineering? This is obviously my home ground, and I am the real protagonist. Thinking of this, Mr. Three, who was about to kneel on his knees, suddenly widened his eyes and regained consciousness. With a fist in his hand, he slammed the hammer on the floor in front of his knees, supporting his crumbling body. He came to this world as a traveler, and he has the potential to be a hero and king, and he has learned the lessons of the original Mr. Three's rough life. Under the influence of these 3 layers, a terrifying force that is beyond everyone's expectations, but is reasonable, is in Mr. Three's body. Awakened. Boom. The incomparably strong unwillingness turned into the will to conquer everything in the world, gushing out from Mr. Three's thin and tired body, condensing into an invincible aura that forcibly ripped apart the overbearing aura exerted by Hancock. It's sizzling. Between the half-kneeling Mr. Three and the proudly standing Hancock, several dark red thunderbolts with a destructive aura burst out, fleeting. However, it was only a very brief collision, and the resulting shock was quite explosive. With the collision as the center, the rocky ground within 10 meters in diameter is like foam, cracking and annihilating every inch. Thump. 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 Among the members of the 9 snake pirates who were watching, the weaker newcomers rolled their eyes and lost consciousness before they realized what happened, and fell to the ground, foaming. The remaining elite female fighters turned pale and looked at Mr. Three in amazement. Bean-sized beads of sweat covered their foreheads, and even breathing became extremely difficult at this moment. Absolutely can't go wrong. The powerful aura that erupted from Mr. Three's body is actually exactly the same as Lord Snakeji, only 1 in millions of people. Overlord is domineering. Ding. Detected that the host self-awakened the domineering look of domineering, stunning the audience. Appearance, personality charm, +10, and physical fitness was slightly improved. Get a special reward. A sea bike of the same type as the former Admiral Aokiji, can be nourished into a black bike through armed colors. Also change the current target reward. Current goal, successfully recruit more than 1 Shichibukai, new or old, to join the Clown Bucky Pirates, strengthen the force, and take the second in command position of the Bucky Pirates. Target reward, 1 Shicibukai, Fruit Ability Development Capsule, Overlord Domineering Awakening Qualification, crossed out, Mr. Rayleigh's Domineering Lecture Hall, new. Event Evaluation. Amazing. Cow Bash. Invincible. A notification from the system came from the back of Mr. Three's mind, but at this time, he was in the center of the collision of the domineering and domineering. Obviously, he didn't have the extra energy to check it, and he didn't even have time to rejoice that his appearance had skyrocketed by 10 points. After barely resisting Hancock's overlord color, Mr. Three only felt that the terrifying pressure on his body suddenly lightened, and the strength that was evacuated gradually returned. In this way, he straightened his back, stood up little by little, and looked at Hancock, who had an incredible face on the opposite side. The cute and new overlord released subconsciously is extremely difficult to control, and naturally it is impossible to get along with Hancock, who has been practicing all year round. Or to be more precise, even the most basic state of competing with each other is difficult to maintain. The main reason why Mr. Three, who had initially awakened the overlord color, was able to withstand the suppression was that Hancock took the initiative to reduce the strength of the overlord color. Whoosh. After standing firm for about 5 seconds, Mr. Three has reached its limit, and the domineering aura surrounding his body plummeted and vanished in the blink of an eye. At the same time, Hancock also lifted his domineering. Witnessing Mr. Three's majesty with her own eyes, she stood there, biting her right thumb nail lightly. From the tightly locked willow eyebrows, it can be seen that there is a strong doubt and confusion lingering in her heart at this time. Is it an illusion? Why do I suddenly feel that after the outburst of domineering, Mr. 3 has become a lot more pleasing to the eye. Ah, no, no. Hancock shook his head slightly and quickly dismissed this irrelevant thought. What really confuses her is actually the huge disparity before and after Mr. 3. Although it was obviously the first awakening unconsciously, it is undeniable that the man in front of him really has the qualifications to become a king, and has the domineering arrogance that countless people dream of. She herself is the holder of domineering and domineering, so she is very clear that if you want to awaken this kind of power, whether it is will, belief, or courage, you need to be impeccable. In front of this level of tyrants, the influence of sweet fruit will become negligible, almost equivalent to no effect. Therefore, the problem will follow. Why? A man with such a level of domineering will be instantly petrified by the sweet wind with all his attention, without the slightest resistance? Mr. 3, I didn't expect you to have the potential of a king. As a pirate queen with a domineering and arrogant style, Hancock didn't bother to speculate, and asked directly. A man like you, logically speaking, should not be affected by my ability. She stared at Mr. 3, who was still in a dazed state, her eyes gloomy. Twice deliberately made the illusion that it can be easily petrified. What is your intention? The calm and watery voice contains the unique power and domineering of the pirate queen. Faced with the questioning, Mr. 3 stood blankly, his facial features appearing rather dull. Because it is a passive explosion after being subjected to a strong external stimulus, the mental power is greatly overdrawn. So now, he actually can't clearly remember the process of the Overlord's sexual confrontation just now. I can only vaguely recall that mysterious state. The one just now, wouldn't it be? The Overlord is domineering, right? Wait. I didn't even need the system reward, and I woke up to the Overlord color by myself? Mr. 3, who gradually recovered his sobriety, was overjoyed. At that time when he was suppressed by Hancock's Overlord, he just didn't want to admit defeat. He didn't want to accept his fate, and he didn't want to just succumb at the feet of a woman. But I never imagined that such a pure idea would directly lead to the big fish of tyrannical and domineering. What a surprise. Answer me, Mr. 3. What conspiracy is behind you deliberately petrifying me? Seeing that Mr. 3 didn't speak for a long time, Hancock asked again. This time, the tone was even colder. To be calculated by a strong man with a domineering look, no matter how you think about it, it is quite a terrible thing. She has even begun to struggle, whether to be right here and obliterate the future powerful enemy of Mr. 3. The world of pirates is quite cruel and bloody. Even an alliance with a good relationship may wield a butcher knife at the opponent in the next second. If you have to choose between letting a scheming overlord grow up and offending a Shicibukai force, Hancock will definitely choose the latter without hesitation. What affected her final judgment was Mr. 3's next answer. Hancock's questioning again finally made Mr. 3 recover from the surprise and shock. The brain is running fast at this moment. Although the sudden awakening of the domineering arrogance interrupted the original plan, it did not let the situation get out of control. On the contrary, if you make good use of this emergency, you can get a more favorable advantage. If it is said that before arriving on the Amazon Lily Island, Mr. 3 is only 10% sure of successfully recruiting Hancock. So now, at least about 20%. As to the answer to this question, I have just said it. After simply sorting out his thoughts, Mr. 3 looked directly at Hancock and said solemnly, Hancock, I hope you can join our Bucky pirates to deal with the next world upheaval together. Hancock was unmoved, still maintaining the attitude of a high-ranking man. Unlike the first time she heard the daydreaming proposal of recruitment, she turned her face and started on the spot. Mr. 3, who showed the aptitude of Overlord, was obviously recognized by her. It's ridiculous. What's the relationship between the two? Hancock asked rhetorically. Since your initial purpose is to recruit, you should show your courage. How can you be petrified so easily? Hearing this, Mr. 3 shrugged helplessly. Before I saw it with my own eyes, I also planned to do the same, and I was confident enough to stay awake in front of your abilities. But when you really face your strange petrified light, for some reason, your body loses its resistance in an instant. If you have to say a specific reason, Mr. 3 has a straight waist and a firm expression. Under the slightly broken goggles, there are a pair of shining eyes. That's right, I'm actually a womanizer. Hancock. Elite members of the 9 Snake Pirates. The mother-in-law and the Snake Sisters. A simple and unpretentious sentence successfully silenced the audience. As an all-female pirate group, the members of the 9 Snake Pirates have seen countless lechers and lewds, and even some admirals who claim to be righteous are doing dirty deals behind their backs. However, I have never seen such an upright and inexplicable pride as Mr. 3. The man in front of him is really the same man as the man exuding domineering aura just now? No, from a certain point of view, perhaps it is because he is a born king that he is so honest about his lust. This shameless remark can't be fixed directly to Hancock. After standing in the same place for a while, she regained her composure, her eyelids drooped, and she said slowly, "Don't you ever think that if this process goes wrong, you will die miserably?" As a sweet fruit power user, she is quite aware of her own power. There are many people in this sea who can resist the influence of sweet light with their own aura, but once they are petrified, even if they are as strong as a naval admiral, they will not be able to return to the sky, and they can only be kicked to pieces. Therefore, in her eyes, Mr. 3's previous practice was no different from standing on thin ice and jumping repeatedly. He would die at any time. For this question, Mr. 3 did not think too much. Naturally, I thought about it, but just as I came here alone on behalf of the Bucky Pirates, this is a risk that I must take to recruit you. If you unfortunately turn into a pile of stones and die here, it will only mean that I am here. So far. This is the truth. No matter what happens, there are risks. Even though Mr. 3 has unparalleled intelligence and overall vision in this world, in the end, he is just an ordinary person. No matter how many calculations there will still be unexpected loopholes and emergencies, just like the domineering awakening of the Overlord. This is the consciousness he shouldered when he made the decision to recruit Hancock. Hancock raised his eyes and stared at Mr. 3 standing in front of him. The Overlord and the knowledge were secretly liberated, but still could not find a flaw. Oh, interesting man. Hancock's tensed pretty face relaxed a little, and the corners of his mouth raised slightly, revealing an alluring, tricky smile. Mr. 3, I admit, your inside is unexpectedly more sincere than your dirty, ugly and sinister appearance, although it is still disgusting and perverted. In this new world divided by men, she has seen too many hypocritical villains. Mr. 3 is really the first one who dares to admit a womanizer in front of his own face, at least among the many tyrannical and domineering powerhouses, unique. What's wrong with man perverting? Mr. 3 retorted firmly in his heart. However, it is clear that such words can easily be killed in the current situation. Honesty and perversion are two different things. He remained calm, silently waiting for Hancock's next words. Not surprisingly, her attitude should make some concessions. Compared to recruiting, now, as the supreme ruler of Amazon Lily, I officially invite you to join as the watchdog of the island, and guard my country with the warriors of protecting the country. Hancock looked serious, and there was no trace of a joke on his flawless pretty face. The calmness on Mr. 3's face was suddenly unbearable.
Your second uncle. Why do you have to make such a thoughtful expression, especially now you are the one I want to recruit?
Also, what the hell is a watchdog? Equally emotional as him were the female warriors of the 9 Snake Pirates. What? Lord Snake Princess actually invites a man to the island. Oh my god, what did I hear? Will there really be men who will live on the island permanently in the future? Watchdog. This is a bit of a waste of his ability. I feel that the ability of candles is more suitable as a cesspool. Mr. 3. Co-authoring sounds like I should be grateful for being the island's watchdog? Outrageous, really out of line. For a time, Mr. 3 was speechless, and the prepared remarks were stuck in his throat, and he didn't know where to come out. Just now, it was his words, a womanizer, who silently silenced the audience, and now Hancock's words, watchdog, silenced him. In a sense, the two were evenly matched opponents. I'm sorry, Hancock, I still have lofty ambitions that have not been realized, and I can't keep the rest of my life here. Of course, if it is the retirement life after the dream is achieved, then I will be happy to protect a group of young and lovely girls on your island. It's my pleasure, boys. After feeling the incomparably tough attitude from Hancock's words, Mr. 3 knew that conventional methods and rhetoric could hardly shake her determination and will. Therefore, he plans to enlarge his moves, and the showdown is over. In my opinion, now you can simply skip the dream that is so boring without thinking about it, save the effort of the process, and live a retirement life decades in advance, isn't it better? Hancock was unmoved. The words of avoiding the important and taking the light seriously also made Mr. 3 secretly sigh that she is the most shrewd original Qiwu pirate empress in this sea. He originally wanted to raise the topic of dream, and lead Hancock to ask questions, and then he could take the lead in the dialogue between the two sides. But I never thought that Hancock didn't ask any questions at all. I don't know if she is not interested at all, or if she realizes the trap in her words. According to Hancock's temperament, the former may be more likely. However, this will not have much impact on Mr. 3's next big move. Actually, I didn't want to bring this up, that's all. After saying this inexplicable sentence, Mr. 3 stood there thinking. After a full half a minute, he sighed heavily as if he had made some kind of difficult decision. Hancock, you should be very puzzled. Why, there are several Shicibukai that have been abolished, and I will choose you as soon as possible. Hearing this, Hancock frowned slightly. Intuition told her that what Mr. 3 was going to say next would be very serious. The female warriors of the 9 snake pirates raised their ears one after another, and they wanted to know the answer to this question. Although this is a bit offensive to Lord Snake Princess, but in their opinion, compared to other Shicibukai, the success rate and mortality rate of recruiting Lord Snake Princess are ridiculously high. Under the gaze of many eyes, Mr. 3 reached out and pushed the goggles on the bridge of his nose, and said slowly, because, as early as 10 or 20 years ago, you and I had a relationship. Mr. 3, if you want to get closer to me, you have to think of a better reason. Apart from going out for adventures, I have always stayed in Amazon Lily. How could I have been with you more than 10 years ago? Wait. What did you say? As he spoke, Hancock's eyes widened suddenly, aware of a terrifying possibility that she could no longer maintain the calm and confidence on her face, hurriedly rushed to Mr. 3, and tugged at Mr. 3's collar with both hands. Who the hell are you? Recalling the hell-like slave life 19 years ago, Hancock's body trembled slightly uncontrollably. It was a past event that she did not dare to face, and a secret that must never be known by outsiders. If this secret is known to outsiders, even in the ends of the earth, she will hunt down to the end. Everyone. Go out now, don't stay here. The mother-in-law is also aware of the seriousness of the matter, and she does not care to verify whether what Mr. 3 said and what she thinks are the same thing, and directly drives out the members of the 9 snake pirates in the hall. The female warriors wanted to resist at first, but after Granny Za picked up the snake crutch and started knocking people's heads, they hugged their heads and ran away, leaving the place in despair. Soon, in the hall of Nuoqigao, only Mr. 3, Hancock, Granny Za and the Snake Man sisters were left. I know this matter is very important to you, so no, don't be too nervous. If I had malicious intentions, I would have threatened you with this long ago. Don't wait. Wait until today, more than 10 years later. Mr. 3, who had intimate contact with Hancock, was short of breath, and his slightly handsome face turned red. Don't get me wrong. This is not an overreaction of blood spurting, but a huge force emerged from Hancock's hands and grabbed his collar, almost suffocating him on the spot. Instead, his words further verified Hancock's guess. The strong fluctuations in her emotions forced her to almost lose her mind. Bloodshot eyes appeared in her frightened eyes, and there was only one thought left in her heart. That is, he must strangle this man who knows his secret in front of him to death. Sheji, calm down and let him finish first. In the end, the mother-in-law stood up, raised the snake cane wrapped in armed colors and tapped Hancock's head lightly, which woke her up from the mad state of losing herself. Mother-in-law. After regaining consciousness, Hancock slowly lowered Mr. 3, who had pulled up his collar and lifted it into the air. Cough. 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 Mr. 3, who was blushing and almost burped, coughed a few times, and breathed in the air greedily. He counted everything, but he never counted. The closest he was to death would be like this. The irrational Hancock is too terrifying. Under the control of her powerful armed sex, she can't even do something as simple as the ability to use the wax fruit. There is still a long way to go with a powerhouse like the Empress who has become famous for a long time. Mr. 3, who finally managed to save his life, sighed in his heart. Then, let's talk about it. What kind of venue and what kind of situation do you think you've seen me for more than 10 years? The opposite Hancock has changed back to his original domineering and confident appearance, but the vibrato mixed in his words still exposed the unease in his heart. Elder sister, the two sisters Sandasonia and Marigold came to Hancock's side, and their eyes showed an even more terrified look. They also recalled that rather terrifying memory. Then, what a terrible time. Facing the tense and hostile gazes of several people, Mr. 3 raised his hands that were shaking violently, slowly took off his shirt, and then turned around stiffly, showing his thin back in front of several people. He was struggling all the way, as if he needed all his strength and courage to complete these simple actions. Acting like a real. As Mr. 3's back, which was twitching like an epilepsy, was completely exposed, the flying dragon's kick mark, which represented the mark of the slaves of the Tianlong people, gradually came into the eyes of the 3 Hancock sisters. What? Seeing this nightmare-like terrifying pattern, the 3 sisters clenched their fists and took a few steps back subconsciously. Hancock is fine as a sister, and more than 20 years of experience have made her heart extremely strong. But the 2 younger sisters were going to be much worse. One fell to the ground without standing still, with fear flashing in his eyes. Seeing the scarred brand on Mr. 3's back, their backs were also faintly hot. This pattern is destined to be the nightmare of their life. This point must be the same for Mr. 3, who had the same experience as them. From the fact that he hurriedly put his shirt back on, he didn't want to stop for a second. A sense of intimacy with the same sickness and pity for each other arises spontaneously in the hearts of the 2 snake sisters. How could the poor people know that the reason why Mr. 3 was dressing so quickly was just because he was afraid that the fake brand behind him would be seen, and he would be beaten into patties on the spot? I believe that when you see that pattern, you already have the answer in your heart. After getting dressed, Mr. 3 turned around. Sweat dripped from his forehead because of excessive fear. In the depths of his flickering eyes, unbearable memories flowed. After escaping from Mary Joa, I accidentally fell on my head due to excessive panic, which caused many things to be forgotten. But the outstanding looks of your 3 sisters impressed me a lot. When the slaves were running away, I almost ran into you head-on. So when I saw your appearance in the newspaper, I immediately recognized. Thoughtful, he made an all-purpose amnesia patch, lest the clues be detected later, and he couldn't answer why. Although theoretically speaking, it is definitely impossible for the 3 Hancock sisters to take the initiative to bring up that dark past. I didn't expect that after more than 20 years, I could meet the victim from that time again. Hancock looked up at the sky. In her eyes, the ornately decorated ceiling suddenly turned into a giant projection cloth, projected on the Holy Land Mary Joa under the raging fire, and the slaves fled in panic. Among them, Mr. 3's wretched and perverted figure could be vaguely seen. After so many years, and when she was escaping for her life at that time, how could she still remember so many details? As for whether Mr. 3 is lying, the slave mark behind him is enough to explain everything. There will be no more than 5 people who know the secret of their 3 sisters. So now, you know why I have to rush to recruit you? Seeing that the time was right, Mr. 3 took a deep breath and decisively expressed his lofty ambitions that he had not been able to express just now. Although it's a bit too whimsical to say that, I have always wanted to be like the hero who freed all slaves, Mr. Fisher Tiger. One day, I will blow open the door of the Holy Land of Mary Joa with an extremely heavy candle, kill all the wicked and damned Tianlong people, and completely liberate the slaves in the world who are enslaved, bullied, and played with. In the past, when the Navy, the Shicibukai, and the 4 emperors were in an ambiguous period of mutual checks and balances, this kind of thing would be more difficult than going to the sky. But now the Shicibukai system has been completely abolished, the balance of the sea has been completely broken, and the world is about to usher in unprecedented chaos. This is the best chance and the only chance. For this reason, even if there is no place to die, our Bucky pirates, will completely subvert this world. Speaking of this, Mr. 3 clenched his fists tightly, his facial features twisted together irregularly. Anger filled his expression, mortal consciousness filled his emotions, and his determination to overthrow the Tianlong people was beyond words. Really acting God. His eyes were very firm, looking straight at Hancock opposite. So, in order to achieve this goal, we need you, Hancock, and the unparalleled power of the Pirate Queen. Please join the Bucky pirates and help us. Hancock stood there in a daze, his expression sluggish, his mouth opened slightly because he was too shocked. If she heard a joke from someone about wanting to overthrow the draconian rule and become a great hero like Fisher Tiger, she would definitely sneer and laugh very loudly. But unlike Mr. 3, who had the same experience as him and was once a slave of the dragons, she could understand his unwilling anger and hysterical hatred for the dragons. I didn't expect Bucky, the smartest clown to live, to have such a crazy idea. After listening to Mr. Three's great ambition, Granny Yi held the snake crutch in one hand and the other behind her back, her old eyes filled with admiration. Other pirate groups may still have doubts about her. After all, this kind of thinking is too shocking, but Bucky is an exception. His name is too loud. The strong man who came out of the Pirate King Gore Rogers' ship has a close relationship with the 4 emperors in red hair. They plan to promote the escape of the city, and even start a live broadcast of the war on the top of the world, in front of the whole world, with the Navy headquarters and the world government do it right. Such a man, no matter what he thinks, is not surprising, even becoming Shicibukai and vigorously developing a mercenary organization in the dark world are most likely just a part of his crazy plan to overthrow the Tianlong people. The more her mother-in-law thought about it, the more frightened she became, and the image of Bucky the clown in her memory suddenly became extremely tall and unfathomable. The dog Bucky's brain complementing color domineering, at this time, launched. This is a road that once you go up, you can never go back. Hancock murmured. Obviously, Mr. Three's words caused a great psychological impact on her. Even so, we are already on our way. Mr. Three's eyes were full of determination to see death. It's such a critical moment when it comes to acting, so naturally you can't show the slightest bit of cowardice. Recalling the evil that the Tianlong people inflicted on him, the blood in Hancock's body that had been dormant for many years recovered little by little. If that's the case, then I too, Snake Princess. Just when Mr. Three thought he was done, his mother-in-law suddenly stood up and stood in front of Hancock. Although she was shocked by the bold idea of the Bucky pirates, she had experienced countless storms and waves, and she still had the sharp eyes of the former Emperor of Amazon. Mr. Three, to be honest, I don't deny your and Bucky's ambitions, and I don't mean to look down on you at all. The mother-in-law stared at Mr. Three, her cloudy eyes twinkling. But old lady, I don't think you need to recruit. Even an alliance can have the same effect, right? For the 9 snake pirates, the most important thing at the moment is to ensure the safety of the residents of the Daughter Island and get rid of the siege and suppression of the warships of the Navy headquarters. As for how to stand firm in the era of great chaos, and even challenge the world government and overthrow the rule of the Tianlong people, it is not so imminent. If you agree to recruit like this, it is almost equivalent to tying the fate of the entire 9 snakes to the Bucky pirates. The pirates are okay, they have the power to protect themselves, but the risk that the Amazon Lily Kingdom needs to take is too great. Faced with such a sharp question, Mr. Three behaved very calmly, obviously having a plan in mind. I can understand your concerns, but the 9 snake pirates join the Bucky pirates, which is the safest choice for you. Hearing this, the 3 Hancock sisters and her mother-in-law all cast puzzled glances. Mr. Three was as steady as a mountain, stretched out a finger, and said indifferently, "There are only 2 Shicibukai forces, and it is not enough to wrestle with the top forces in this sea. Therefore, our goal is to recruit as many Shicibukai forces as possible to strengthen ourselves. Because of the special relationship with the Tianlong people's brand, I can communicate with you in this special way, but obviously, it is completely impossible to replace it with other Shicibukai. For those guys who are shrewd to the top of your fingernails, you must use tougher and more insidious means. If you openly admit to joining the Bucky pirates, it will be an invisible shock and beating for them." That's the truth, and why he chose Hancock as his first recruit. With the addition of the pirate Empress Hancock, the difficulty of recruiting other Shicibukai will be reduced a lot. Aside from her reputation and prestige, her combat power alone is enough to attract attention. After all, Hancock, but even the former Admiral Warring States publicly commented that that woman is very strong. Seeing the mother-in-law and the others fell into contemplation, as if weighing the pros and cons, Mr. Three continued to ensure them. Furthermore, if the 9 snake pirates join the Bucky pirates in the name of a subordinate, the Navy headquarters will focus more on the Bucky pirates, thereby reducing the level of attention to Amazon Lily. Although this is bad news for our Captain Bucky, rest assured, the cargo is rough and meaty and can handle it. As soon as these words came out, it was considered to ease the current tense and serious atmosphere. PFF'd. How could anyone cheat on their captain like that? Sandasonia, who was dragging her long snake's tongue, couldn't help covering her mouth and chuckling. The solemn expressions on Hancock's and Granny's faces also relaxed. Seeing this, Mr. 3 breathed a sigh of relief. If nothing else, there should be no problem with recruiting Hancock, because they don't have much time to weigh the pros and cons. Lord Snake Princess. What a mother-in-law. It's not good, there is a warship sailing to the sea outside. While hesitating, a panicked report from the officials of the 9 snake pirates suddenly sounded outside the hall. Before Hancock could give instructions, loud horns came from the outer sea and spread throughout the island. Boya Hancock. Immediately hand over Mr. 3, the core cadre of the Bucky pirates who infiltrated the island, otherwise we will have to take necessary actions for safety reasons. Boya Hancock. Immediately hand over Mr. 3, the core cadre of the Bucky pirates who infiltrated the island, otherwise we will have to take necessary actions for safety reasons. The 3 Hancock sisters and her mother-in-law were all shocked, and looked at Mr. 3 opposite. I saw that Mr. 3 was also taken aback, his brows furrowed, and he murmured, I obviously tried to hide my appearance as much as possible, but I didn't expect that the Navy was still aware of the trail. Damn Kirby, it's not that easy to fool characters. Ghost. Mr. 3 said the truth, but he couldn't help but secretly said, it's coming. When he was discovered by the sailors of the naval patrol ship, in order to act realistically, he held up gold, silver and jewels and wanted to bribe. After being rejected, he scraped off the candles on the ship and handed them out, completely frightened and out of his mind performance. However, this one actually contains a great plan. Because this will become a very critical clue, allowing the Navy to follow the clues, and through the information point of candle, quickly lock Mr. In this way, they, who are afraid of the contact between the 2 Shicibukai, will definitely take action as soon as possible, and even start the encirclement and suppression of Daughter's Island in advance, thus forcing Hancock to make a quick decision. Although there have been some changes in the process, it has to be said that the actions taken by the Navy are quite timely. Is this the effect of the S-rank lucky bonus of the Clown Bucky Pirates faction? Mr. 3 couldn't help but let out a joke in his heart. Time is running out, make a decision, Snake Girl. Granny Zaw looked up at Hancock. She said no more, her attitude was already quite obvious. Hancock nodded, stepped out, came to Mr. 3, his eyes were extremely serious. In that case, Mr. 3, I can agree to join the Bucky Pirates, but... After a pause, Hancock continued, I said before, we have the right to refuse some unreasonable instructions from Captain Bucky based on our own interests, and we can also opt out at any time. No problem at all, I can make a promise on behalf of Captain Bucky. Mr. 3 agreed quite readily. Anyway, he only needs to make sure that he is successfully recruited, and that he will become handsome and strong after getting quest rewards. As for the many subsequent agreements and additional conditions between the 2 parties, that is something that Bucky should have a headache for. Then, in the name of the core cadres of the Bucky Pirates, I welcome you to join, Boya Hancock. Mr. 3 reached out to Hancock. Forget about the extra process, let's hurry up and transfer the residents of the island. Hancock threw his cloak behind him, his face full of disgust. It's natural, but until then. Mr. 3, who had a ghost in his heart, had no choice but to withdraw his arm and scratched his head. Huh. Any more questions? Hancock asked. Mr. 3 hesitated for a while, and after serious thinking, he decided to speak. According to the style of our Bucky Pirates, new partners have to call me third brother, look. Sweet and sweet. Boom. A stone statue quacks to the ground. Former Shicibukai pirate queen Boya Hancock accepted the recruitment, and the current goal of successfully recruited more than 1 Shicibukai to join the Clown Bucky Pirates is completed as soon as the progress is completed. Goal reward 15. Fruit ability development capsule, Mr. Lay's domineering lecture hall, face value plus 20. Target evaluation. A. Although it is not perfect and almost died on the spot, but the overall performance is excellent, and the physical fitness has been slightly improved. The corresponding rewards have been distributed to the system space. Open the second stage of the main objective. Open the branch goal, Hancock's Transcendence. The strongest Emperor subsystem, host, Mr. 3. Appearance. 70 physical fitness. B+, lucky value. E plus S. The Clown Bucky camp has its own buff, it will disappear when it leaves. Abilities. Wax Fruit, Unawakened, Armed Color Domineering, Mungshin, Scene Color Domineering, Mungshin, Overlord Color Domineering, Preschool, Passive Release. Props. Former Admiral Aokiji Seabike, Fruit Ability Development Capsule, Mr. Rayleigh's Domineering Lecture Hall. Main line goal. Successfully recruit more than one Shichibukai, new or old, to join the Clown Bucky Pirates, strengthen the force, and take the second-in-command position of the Bucky Pirates. Goal Reward. Completed. Evaluation A. Target Reward 2. 2 Shicibukai, Fruit Ability Development Capsule, Different Dimensional Ability Training Manual, 3-Color Domineering. Choose 1 to upgrade, Appearance +6. Sub-line goal. Hancock's Transcendence, Domineering and Domineering completely surpass Hancock. Target Reward. A book of advanced physical skills. Although Mr. 3 was caught off guard and turned into a stone sculpture, he was still able to perceive the system prompts coming from the back of his mind. When he observed that his appearance surpassed the per capita pass line and reached 70, he couldn't hold back, and wept with joy. It's not easy to become handsome, but my grandfather has become handsome. Although he is a stone sculpture now, he will not shed tears. In any case, the goal of this first stage is considered to have been successfully completed. Whether it is fruit ability or domineering, it can get a good improvement, which is quite worth looking forward to. Time is pressing, and Hancock naturally cannot petrify Mr. 3 for too long. With the passing of the reverse pink light, Mr. 3's body lightened and regained his free body. Do you still need me to call you third brother? Hancock made a cold question with a blank face. Inwardly, he was quite shocked by Mr. 3's inexplicably handsome face. In just a few seconds, he gave the impression that such a huge difference could occur. Even those sloppy beards on his face looked a little more manly and free and easy. Does my sweet light still have a beauty effect? Hancock suddenly had such an illusion. When Mr. 3's temperament changed subtly before, she thought she was blessed by the awakened overlord, but now that she thinks about it carefully, before Mr. 3's awakening, she was indeed petrified by sweet sweet wind. If true, this would be an interesting discovery. Hancock set his eyes on the mother-in-law beside him. Well, if I have a chance, I have to use this old thing to try the effect. Not only Hancock, but the Snake Man sisters and Granny Zaw also noticed the change in the appearance of Mr. 3 before and after. Maybe it's because he waxed his face. Unlike Hancock, who is a sweet fruit ability, they naturally attribute this change to the ability of the wax fruit. In any case, this is an insignificant little thing after all, and a few people don't particularly care about it. No need, no need. Mr. 3 shook his head with a dry smile on his lips. At the same time, he cursed in his heart. His grandma is a chicken leg, how can there be such a perverted fruit of the Empress? I completely forgot the fact that I was a pervert. Now, let's hurry up and transfer the Amazon Lily residence. The mother-in-law took a step forward with the snake cane. Her eyes were mixed with a touch of worry. Let's not respond again. The Navy outside is probably going to come in. Mr. 3, you said earlier that you can use petrochemicals and candles to transfer from the seabed. You must have a complete plan, right? She looked up at Mr. 3. The 3 Hancock sisters also looked at them. They all belong to the fighting faction who use their fists to solve all problems, and the design and planning are really lacking. It's natural. Mr. 3 put away his heart full of joy, suppressed his eagerness to check the target reward, and slowly revealed his long-planned plan. On the other hand, the command room of the Navy warship. Major General Kirby, Hancock hasn't responded for a long time, should we take further action? A certain Navy colonel said worriedly. The Bucky pirates sent a force like Mr. 3 to contact Hancock when their base was besieged, which is really not a good signal. As soon as these words came out, many generals in the command room also expressed their views, and there was a lot of discussion for a while. In the main seat, wearing the cloak of justice, Kirby, who was already able to stand alone, had a serious expression and raised his hand to interrupt the noisy discussion. The 9 Snakes pirates haven't moved yet, which is enough to show that this incident reveals a conspiracy. Of course we can't just let them go, so from now on, we will gradually ask the journalists on board to leave. If Daughter's Island still doesn't respond after 5 minutes, then. Speaking of this, Kabi's heroic eyes suddenly sank. Start the operation to encircle and suppress the pirate queen Boyahan Cook in advance, and while ensuring the safety of the island's residents, capture or annihilate the 9 snake pirates. This is the first major mission he has undertaken since he was promoted to Rear Admiral of the Navy headquarters. In order to live up to Mr. Karp's support and expectations, it must be completed successfully. It's a pity that he is destined to taste the taste of failure and frustration. Major General Kebi, there's a movement from the 9 snake pirates. The Navy in charge of intelligence hurried in to report. Come on. What's the situation? Kirby asked quickly. They didn't respond to Mr. 3, but the sea soldiers faltered, and under the stern gazes of many generals in the command, they still mustered the courage to report loudly. Instead, he shouted at us. If we do not follow the original Shicibukai treaty, withdraw Amazon Lily 2 nautical miles, and send an apology letter, the 9 snake pirates will launch a general attack on us at sunset. No way. She pirate queen thinks she is Shicibukai, and wants us to write an apology letter? The grumpy Scar's face slapped violently, shattering the table in front of him. The other generals also looked gloomy, with anger brewing in their hearts. The entire command room fell into a murderous silence. Whoosh. A gust of sea breeze blew from the window of the command room, making the cloaks behind everyone rattle, and the word, justice, on it was striking. Whizzing. Feeling the depressing atmosphere in the arena that was about to die, Haifeng speeded up and left very wisely. When the wind stopped, Kebi, who was in the main position, finally gave instructions. It seems that Hancock must have reached some cooperation with the Bucky pirates, otherwise his attitude would not be so tough. But that's fine. They took the initiative to provoke trouble, so that we will not have to go back and make a false statement about the siege of Shicibukai for no reason. Kirby slowly stood up and looked at the surrounding admirals of the Navy headquarters with a chilling expression. Notify the warships and immediately enter the combat state. Once the pirate ship of the 9 snake pirates leaves the island and has any intention of attacking us, immediately launch an all-round counterattack. Yes. The generals stood up one after another and saluted. Everyone's faces showed excitement, and the fighting spirit surged, and they began to look forward to this battle with Shicibukai. This will be a battle of great significance of the times. They are destined to become famous because of this battle. What the admirals of the Navy headquarters, including Kebi, did not expect to be killed was that the people on their side were full of anger and blood, and on the other side of Daughter's Island, under the planning of Mr. 3, they quietly started the Mingshou Plank Road and crossed Chengqing secretly. Old 6 Acts. The setting sun hangs at the end of the windless coastline, and the orange sun sways down, covering the entire Amazon Lily Island with a faint halo. On the island, Mr. 3 stood on the largest street in 9 Snake City, looking at the hundreds of large and small female stone sculptures in front of him, stretched out his right hand and scratched his head, looking a little tricky. If he was at his peak, it would be no problem if he wanted to create a candle that could cover thousands of people. But not long ago, a lot of physical strength was consumed in the battle with the Snake Sisters. Later, Hancock forced him to stimulate the domineering, and the remaining physical strength was quite limited. The current situation is urgent, and naturally there is no time to rest and recover. Therefore, Mr. 3 did not hesitate, and directly took out the system reward, Fruit Ability Development Capsule, in the back of his mind. When he obtained this item, he had already extracted the relevant effect introduction. Fruit Ability Development Capsule. A magical capsule with blue and white color matching. After swallowing, it will strengthen a certain index of fruit ability by 20% according to the will of the eater, greatly shortening the time of research and exercise. Current Devil Fruit Ability. Wax Fruit, Accuracy, 66%, can simulate candle weapons in the form of swords, armor, keys, etc. Strength. 73%. Liquid has good buffering performance, solid hardness is close to steel. Characteristic. 70%, can create a wax figure exactly the same as the character to confuse the enemy. Note. When the 3 indicators reach 100%, the fruit ability can be awakened. Judging from the fruit ability information, the original owner of Mr. 3 has actually developed the fruit ability quite well, otherwise he would not have won the reputation of Unlock King. What Mr. 3 wants to improve this time is naturally the accuracy of the wax fruit. As long as the use of candles can be controlled more precisely, unnecessary wear and tear can be reduced to the greatest extent, so as to achieve the purpose of saving physical strength. Golem. Mr. 3 took the capsule and studied it for a while, and after seeing nothing special, he directly threw it into his mouth and swallowed it. The Fruit Ability Development Capsule has been successfully used, and the current accuracy is 86%. Whoosh. The refreshing coolness flows all over the body as the capsule enters the stomach, and finally gathers in the mind, turning into an indescribable sense of clarity. At this moment, the experience and inspiration about the precise control of the wax fruit gushed out like a tide. In just a few tens of seconds, Mr. 3 seems to have undergone long-term training, and has a further understanding of the use of the wax fruit ability. What did you eat just now? Hancock walked slowly on high heels, with doubts in his beautiful eyes. Behind her are the Snake Sisters and the crew and officers of the 9 snake pirates. A secret medicine that can restore physical strength. Mr. 3, who felt quite good about himself, moved his wrists and glanced at Hancock, who was still relaxed after petrifying everyone. After all, unlike a monster like you who is boundless, I'm just an ordinary person with limited physical strength. Ordinary people with domineering looks. If your words are heard by the pirates in the New World, they will probably be hacked to death by random knives. Hancock snorted coldly. Cough cough. Mr. 3 laughed dryly. Judging from the displeased glances of the Snake Sisters and the 9 snake pirates not far away, it seems that there is indeed some Versailles. Then, I'll start now. For fear of being stared at by jealous eyes, Mr. 3 did not delay any longer, stepped forward, and the 3-shaped hairstyle above his head ignited with a buzzing sound. The viscous candles poured out from his arms continuously. With the enhanced precision, like a liquid creature with self-awareness, it arrived at every stone statue on the streets of 9 Snakes City with precision. After the surface of the stone statue is completely covered, it instantly hardens to form a layer of candle protective shell with uniform thickness and incomparable strength. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of candle statues appeared in front of Hancock and Granny Zaw. This is not over yet. As Mr. 3's forehead oozes a little sweat, the range of the fluid candle continues to expand and spread to further streets. In order not to attract the attention of the Navy, Hancock did not gather the residents of the entire 9 Snakes City. Petrochemical, but relatively fragmented apart. This undoubtedly increases Mr. 3's ability burden, but he is also trying to see how much he can do with his enhanced precision control. In the end, the coverage of the liquid candle stayed in the area 50 meters away. That is to say, in the case of abundant physical strength, as long as Mr. 3 is willing, within a radius of 50 meters, it will become a candle field that is extremely beneficial to him. Thinking deeper, if the same micro-dynamite as the unique trick, Candle Spitfire, developed by myself is incorporated into this field, the effect. You can definitely blow yourself up. Considering the frailty of Mr. 3's body, Mr. 3 shook his head slightly and temporarily put down this crazy idea. However, with this level of precision, is it possible to create candle soldiers similar to the cookie soldiers of the Big Mom Pirates' 3 General Star Cradles? Compared with the super large candle that kills enemies and destroys, this development direction is really worth a try. Of course, the top priority at present is the waxing task of the residents of Daughter Island. 10 minutes later, tired and panting, Mr. 3 leaned against the wall and gasped for breath. He was almost exhausted, so he could barely maintain a standing posture. Living up to expectations, the residents of 9 Snake City have all successfully covered the candle protection layer. The success of this one-hand operation shocked the audience. Looking at the white and jade-like candle art on the street, the members of the 9 Snake Pirates who stayed in charge of the transfer mission exclaimed in amazement. What a powerful control, is this the senior cadre of the Bucky Pirates? What should I do? I suddenly feel that Mr. 3 looks a lot more pleasing to the eye than at the beginning. This is the so-called charm of a man. Give it up. A man like him doesn't look down on you. Fuck you. Did I say anything? Give it up. A man like him doesn't look down on you. Bastard. He even repeated it. Why did my mother-in-law come out of many sister papers? Even the well-informed, she did not hesitate to express her admiration. As expected of a man with a tyrannical appearance, the degree of manipulation of this fruit ability is an eye-opener for me. Zaw. You can't help much next time, are you ready? Hancock looked down at his mother-in-law, and at the same time as the voice fell, sweet light followed. She couldn't hold back her curiosity for a long time, and wanted to study whether the petrochemical light really has a beauty effect. Now the opportunity is in front of you, definitely don't miss it. Snake Princess. You treat old age like this. Before the mother-in-law could finish her words, the light penetrated her body and turned it into a stone sculpture. Standing in place and waiting for a few seconds, Hancock raised his hand again to remove Granny's petrification. Why did my mother-in-law continue what she couldn't finish just now? Is it human? Do you understand what politeness is? Do you understand? Sweet and sweet. The mother-in-law was caught off guard and turned into a stone sculpture again. Hancock retracted the palm of his release ability, and recalled that Granny Zaw, the tool man who had not changed and was still ugly, frowned slightly. Strange, petrochemical light really has no beauty effect. She turned her attention to Mr. 3. So what happened to Mr. 3? Is it really because of sticking wax on his face? At the moment of doubt, the sunset in the sky has already fallen, and the darkness that belong to the night are spreading from the end of the coastline little by little. Sandasonia, Marigold, you can start the lure plan. Mr. 3 doesn't know Hancock's inner confusion, he only knows that time is running out. Understand. Sandasonia and Marigold, who were standing by, nodded and turned to leave. One of them began to direct and arrange the members of the Nine Snakes Pirates to transfer the residence's wax statues, and the other came to the entrance and exit of Amazon Lily, opened the gates, and let the Nine Snakes Pirates' pirate ship, Perfume, which was ready for the outer power. The snake slowly sailed out of the island. On the spacious deck, all the members of the Nine Snake Pirates appeared, all standing with a chilling expression. They are either armed with long swords and large knives, or with muskets and cannons, and they are aggressive, as if they are about to fight. Behind these members, with the support of the two giant snake men sisters, Captain Hancock sat on the main seat with his knees crossed, and his cloak fluttered in the sea breeze behind him. In her expression, there is a fierce killing intent like a beast, like a sea queen who is about to go on an expedition. Mr. 3's ability is really useful, he can even do it to this extent. Looking at the candle statue prepared in advance on the perfume snake, Sandasonia couldn't help but murmured. Such a real wax figure, not to mention the Navy, even herself, can't tell the real from the fake unless she is close enough. This is an integral part of the Mr. 3 transfer plan and echoes the previous threat to the Navy's Sunset General Offensive. As long as this pirate ship that gathered all the combat power of the Nine Snake Pirates appears in the Navy's field of vision, it will definitely attract their great attention, and most of the troops will be concentrated and ready for battle. As a result, the monitoring power of other locations on Deoda Island will inevitably decrease, so as to ensure that the transfer plan is foolproof. Under Sandasonia's reluctant gaze, the Perfume Snake, the foreign ship that had accompanied them on their adventures for many years, took on its final mission and slowly sailed toward the naval warship in the open sea. The dark side of the night happened to pass by at this time. Looking from a distance, the Perfume Snake, which sailed into the depths of darkness, was like a proud and lonely warrior, firmly heading towards the abyss called destruction. This will be the last time it will represent the prestige and honor of the pirate Empress. Set sail.